Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Friday. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. I missed you guys yesterday, so we're back and we're going to have some fun today. We are going to talk about players that are declaring for the NFL draft, how Notre Dame is going to replace them, other players that have NFL draft decisions looming, and then, of course, we will have a mailbag. So go ahead and start throwing in your questions now, and we will get to those. It's going to be a hopefully fun here next few weeks. And so that's what we're looking forward to here. I'm sure there's other things you want to talk about. Ryan addressed the Dylan Edwards situation last night, so we won't cover it during the show today. But if you guys want to get into it further, we can do that during the mailbag. It'll just be up to you guys if you want to discuss it or not. So, Ryan, the first thing we're going to discuss is on Wednesday, we were going to do a so should they stay or go type of show. And at the time, we were going to discuss Michael Mayer, and then we were going to discuss Isaiah Foskey, and then some others. Well, then they had the Brandon Hillman commitment, and Michael Mayer declared on Wednesday, and then Isaiah Foskey declared yesterday. So I think it actually, not doing a show yesterday, to me, actually, Ryan, worked out because we would have wasted time talking about whether or not Isaiah Foskey should or shouldn't stay. Now he's made his decision because I think the thing that you and I probably would have said he needed to do probably wasn't going to happen. Right. And I think that had already kind of been decided what he was going to do. And now we can just talk about his decision. And what does it mean for Notre Dame? We'll get into the draft implication stuff down the road. I know you talked a little bit about it last night with Sean Stiers. We'll talk about it more as we kind of get through the bowl season, through the signing days, and get closer to the combine and then the draft coming up. We'll have plenty to talk about. These two players as draft prospects, where they may be picked. And there'll be a lot more clarity then too, Ryan. And as we get through pro days, and I would imagine both of those guys will get combine invites. I imagine they'll probably work out some at the pro day, depending on how the combine goes. So I have plenty of time to talk about the NFL draft aspect of their departure. We're going to focus right now on you see we have a little special co-host here. That's Rita. So, so we're going to have a little bit of a discussion here on sort of where does Notre Dame go? And how do they replace them? Now, the negative towards players sitting out bowl games is you don't have some of your best players for bowl games. The positive, however, Ryan, is these practices and these games, because Isaiah and Michael did the right thing and made their decision early, didn't go through practices and all that kind of stuff. They didn't take reps away from kids who will be doing this. And that's I've had some issues in the past with guys like Ohio State last year. They had guys that kind of went through the practices and then decided to leave, sit out. These kids did it the right way, made their decision early. They're moving on. And now Notre Dame gets a chance at both positions, tight end and Viper, to see what they have next.
Yeah, it's almost an immediate kind of test period to see what you have, right? I mean, we called it an evaluation process, right? Is kind of what we're looking at for the next X amount of practices, whatever practice they're already on for the bowl prep. And you get to see what you have currently, where maybe you need to bolster the roster, where you need to improve, where the players need to make improvements. So I think this is kind of just a little sneak peek into what spring is going to look like, right? What fall next year might look like. And you have options, which will be interesting. And you have some guys that are more veteran-laden options on the roster too, Brian, and then we'll get to see if maybe Notre Dame goes a little more in the youth movement discussion or if there's a combination of the two, right? So I think that it's going to be interesting because you're going to see different scenarios as far as what the number of snaps players get, what the volume perspective is for certain guys, if we see guys that we haven't seen much of at this point into the season. So it's going to be fascinating, especially at Viper, is one where we've already talked about, kind of the excitement over a couple players you already have on the roster. What do they look like in the bowl game? Do they start to get that, extra workload, or is it something that you just kind of ease them along? So both at tight end and Viper, I think that you have a little bit of a test period to see what you have currently and where you need to go in order to get to, the necessary level that you deem a necessity to be a successful team.
So let's begin at tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Mayer was the first player to announce that he was leaving. Not even going to get into the Mackey Award because then this show will go a completely different direction.
But Brian,
so we're not going to get into the Mackey Award because this show is going to go in a completely different direction.
I was just going to say, and I won't go to the Mackey Award. I'll just say that those were some of the worst awards recipients that I've seen.
I wanted to be like, tell me you don't watch college football without telling me you don't watch college football. It's kind of how I felt about the award show last night.
There was like 3 or 4 where I was just like, really? That's okay. Yeah. We don't have to get into it. I apologize.
Yes. Insane. So Ryan's just trying to tweak me on this Friday. Y'all see it.
Someone ask it in the mailbag. Mailbag.
I mean, if we get into the rant in the mailbag, I mean, that's the place for rants. I want to try to keep this section to, staying on topic and where we're going to go. So when we first look at Michael Mayer, obviously you're losing great production, the most prolific tight end in Notre Dame history. Mm-hmm. One of the 3 most productive tight ends in the country this year, depending on that. I think catches, he ended up like 3rd, yards, he ended up like 2nd or 3rd, touchdowns, he finished 1st. And a guy that has just been really an impact player from the minute he stepped foot on campus. And as a junior, became a much more effective blocker as the season went on and really became an all-around player, incredible force in the lineup, great 3rd down weapon. And then off the field, the other stuff, the leadership, the work ethic, the standard that he set for how to go about your business on a daily basis. All of those things are aspects of this that you're going to lose. And that's the thing about losing a guy like a Michael Mayer, even more so than maybe some of the other players they're going to lose from the current roster, is his impact on this football team went way beyond just, wow, he was really good and he was productive.
Right.
And I think that's what adds into sort of the challenge of replacing a guy like him is you're not just replacing 67 catches for 809 yards and 9 touchdowns. You're replacing someone who forced defenses to focus on him, someone who took attention away from the other guy, someone who off the field was a leader, had a great work ethic, was someone who could hold people to a certain standard and had the voice to walk in and say, this isn't okay. This isn't happening, right. And you're losing all that. And that's not going to be easy to replace. And the reality is there is no one player that's going to replace all of that. There's not 2 or 3 players that are going to replace all of that. It is truly, and we'll get into specifics of what we mean by this, the replacing everything that Michael Mayer brought to the table is going to require an entire team effort. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. Yeah. When I mean team, offensive team, I'm talking about the offensive team. It's going to require an entire effort from everybody. And I don't say that, like I said, I don't say that hyperbolically, Ryan.
No, I mean, it's hard to quantify, honestly, Brian, because like it'd be easy to just talk about supplementing production, right? Like we could talk here, pretty easily about, where can they go to get 67 more receptions on the roster, right? Where are they going to get 809 yards? Where can they get 9 touchdowns? And that's the easy part, right? But I think what makes Michael Mayer so special is that despite only being a junior and probably 21 years old, he was incredibly mature for his age. And he has that charisma to him where people follow him, right? There's no question of who the leader is offensively, right? Like everyone's going to look to that guy because that's what everyone wants to emulate. That's who everyone wants to be. That's the guy. And I just really can't speak as highly enough of Michael Mayer because truly one of the best players that I've ever seen don the blue and gold, one of the best players of my lifetime, bar none. He's that type of dude. He did it only in 3 years, which is just miraculous, remarkable, whatever word you want to use. Like it's not hyperbole to say that we watched a legend play for the last 3 years. We did. Like that's who Michael Mayer was. But I agree with you. It's not just going to come down to 3 tight ends in the room, maybe using 12 personnel and using actually both tight ends in the passing game more than we have seen. It's not going to come down to just supplementing production. It's going to come down to, hey, some wide receivers that need to step up, right? So maybe some more running back usage in the pass game. You have to kind of take little parts of everything because again, you're replacing a legend here, folks. Like you're not just replacing a really good football player. You're replacing one of the best that has ever done it at a school that produces tight ends as well as anybody.
Right.
I mean, Notre Dame is tight end U, and he is arguably the best to ever do it. Like, I mean, that's where we are right now. So I think when you look at this loss, It doesn't come down to, it doesn't come down to Eli Raritan, Holden Stace, or Holden Stace and Michael Bauman, or Michael Bauman and Kane Barong. Like, it doesn't come down to just figuring out who the next tight ends are in line. It comes down to wide receivers need to supplement production. Running backs need to pick it up. Offensive line. There needs to be guys that make themselves the de facto third down option, right? The guy that you trust in those high pressure situations. This is going to be a collaborative effort. So yeah, we're going to talk about what the tight end position might look like, right? Because that's obviously the starting points. But I agree with you 100% in the sense that this isn't just where this ends, right? The conversation might start with who's the tight ends that need to pick up the slack, but it doesn't end there. It quickly goes into what around them needs to help supplement that production as well.
So the first thing to understand about the tight end position at Notre Dame, and it's a little strange as we get into what's it going to look like next year. Notre Dame kind of has two tight end positions, and it's almost like W and X, where they don't view every player to be able to do both. Some guys are more one or the other, right? And so it's an F, and I believe the other one is H, is the two positions that they have. Mayer was the F. He'll line up, attach some, but he's going to move around a ton, play in the slot, move outside. That's actually part of the offense. It's not just, we did it because of Michael Mayer. That's kind of what that position does. And then the other one is more of the traditional tight end that Mitchell Evans played. So as you kind of look into, let's first talk about how you replace Michael Mayer in the lineup. Then we'll dive into the production and all those other type of things. So how you replace him in the lineup, the first question you have to ask yourself is, who are your two tight ends? Who are your top two tight ends going to be? Because I think that's going to have an impact. So some people say, well, you just slide Mitchell Evans over to that position. I don't think that's necessarily how they're going to go. I think it depends on who's your number two tight end. Is it Eli Raritan? Will he be back in time to step into that role? Is it Kevin Bauman? Is it going to be Kane Barong? Is it going to be Holden Stace? We don't know the answer to that question yet. And the reason it's important to know that answer is because you're not going to move, at least a smart coach won't move Mitchell Evans to Michael Mayer's role if the number two tight end is Holden Stace or Kane Barong.
Right.
Or if one of those guys steps into is their best tight end and Mitchell Evans stays number two. And so that's kind of a big part of it is it's not as easy just saying, well, Mitchell Evans was the number two. He slides into that role that Mayer left. That's not how it works. It's technically considered. It's like saying if the W leaves, your best receiver's Braden Lindsey, you're not going to move Braden Lindsey into the spot that your best player played, who's the W, right? It's just not quite how it works. And so to me, that's going to be a part of it. Now, obviously, with Holden Stace, he got a lot of chance to play this year. Eli Raritan, his situation, he's a bit of a wild card right now because he tore his knee again, same knee. That's two injuries to the same knee. That's not a good sign. We don't know how he's going to heal. We don't know the timeline. He got hurt kind of middle of the year. And so that kind of is going to put him into fall camp return type of time at the earliest. So that's going to be an interesting part of this conversation, Ryan. So what I do know is this, barring just guys going off in the offseason, and even then it may not matter, Mitchell Evans is going to have a key role in this offense next year. Right. The question that I have is, if he is your number one tight end, are you going to maintain playing a lot of 12 and then he stays as your sort of your H, which is the more traditional tight end, and then maybe a Barong and a Stace step into that other role and then maybe your pass game focuses more on what the traditional tight end does as opposed to the detached tight end? Do you have more 11 personnel stuff, which then allows him to stay in the role he is now a little bit more, and you can have him attached more, which adds something to your run game, a little bit out of your 11 personnel alignments. Those are all different things that are going to factor into just who plays where and how much. Right. And so I think that's the first thing that people have to understand is that adds a little bit of an intrigue. It's not as easy to say Mayer or Mitchell Evans goes here and so moves here, and it just the way that they run their tight end, it makes it a little bit it's a little bit unique as far as who's going to be that guy to replace Mayer in the lineup, because Mitchell Evans may become the number one tight end, but it doesn't mean he's necessarily going to replace Michael Mayer in that spot in the lineup.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting, Brian, is if the unfortunate injury didn't happen to Eli Raritan and maybe he just kept projecting and kind of developing the way he was going. I mean, do you feel like if Eli Raritan was healthy and maybe him and Mitchell Evans were the de facto top two, I think Eli would potentially maybe give you a little bit more diversity to play both spots, right? Like, I mean, I think that Eli, with how he was blocking, if he continued just to, get stronger and develop, like he could potentially be an F or an H in this offense. So I think that you can now look at that and be like, hey, do those positions become a little interchangeable, right? Because maybe Mitchell can do a little bit more detached and then you feel fine about Eli being more in line. Or if you just want to keep Mitchell in line more, then you could detach Eli Raritan a ton, right? So I think that also hurts the projection a little bit because I do think that Eli Raritan, if healthy and fully counted upon, could be that guy that maybe could play both spots. So that could help the interchangeableness. But to your point, Holden Stace is a gifted athlete, can really catch the football. And I think he's got potential to be a guy that can put his hand in the dirt as he continues to develop. But right now he's 230 something pounds, right? Like he's just not fully developed to that role. Kane Barong is just naturally a little bit of a smaller or shorter guy, I should say. I shouldn't say small because he's pretty, he's like 240 something pounds, right? So like he's pretty packed together. But I think that right now makes the most sense to me, Brian, is that you're hoping that, again, until Eli's back and you can kind of depend on him, I look at Holden and I look at Kane Barong, like those types of guys, and say, one of you guys needs to show me that you can play F in this offense. If you can, then you feel comfortable with just keeping Mitchell there because I think Mitchell can be a really effective player. I mean, regardless, though, if you do stick with that option and you play a lot of 12 personnel still, you need to use Mitchell Evans in the passing game next year. Like you need to be able to do that to supplement production. I know we'll talk about that more, but I think the most natural thing is see who wins the F spot, hopefully.
I personally just don't think Mitchell Evans fits that role the way Michael Mayer does. I think he's a better fit for the position he's in now, right? And what I would say is if Mitchell's your best tight end, this isn't a comment on can he be their best tight end. That's not it at all. I think he can become their best tight end. It's okay, but are you using him best at F or H? That's kind of where I look at it. And so to me, it's like, okay, if he's going to be your best tight end, I'd still use him. I mean, you can spread him out a little bit, but I mean, look, Mitchell Evans doesn't move like Michael Mayer did. He's they're different type of athletes. He's not as strong as Michael Mayer. So like Michael Mayer, didn't always gain separation with great athleticism and speed. That's not his game. Him and Brock Bowers are polar opposites in that regard, right? But he was so strong, and Mitchell Evans is not close to that right now. Now, he's a little longer than Michael Mayer, but he doesn't get great separation. We saw that this year in times when he was asked to run vertically. I think where he could really be a weapon in the pass game is more as an attached guy, matched up against linebackers, matched up against safeties, working the seams, the overs, the unders, the crossers, things like that. Yeah.
Maybe more like a Troy Nicholas type of player.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. More of and also how they use Cole Kmet to a degree. More of a, you can still line him up outside a little bit, but I think that's more of a role that fits him than as opposed to, Mayer just out bullying people out in space.
Sure.
And because there were times where Michael Mayer's hauling in balls where you're like, a normal tight end isn't strong enough to make that play. He's just so physically strong that you're just like, there's nothing you could do. What the mistake would be is if they try to make Mitchell Evans into Michael Mayer. And I don't think the staff is going to do that. I think they're smart enough to know that this was a unique player. It would be unfair to ask Mitchell to be that. It's more about, okay, here's who we have on the offense now. Let's tailor it to those guys. And for me, I think that means Mitchell Evans stays at H. Now, if he is your best guy, then you just tailor your pass game to using that role more as opposed to the F more. And maybe that F position becomes more of a 21 personnel where it's more of a back playing some of those things. Taking those reps, meaning not running the same routes Michael Mayer did, but taking those reps and then building around what that looks like. Maybe it's more 11 personnel. I actually would like to see that a little bit more. Then that also, I think, then makes Kane Barong and Holden Stace, as those guys fit into those roles a little bit, takes a little bit of the pressure off of them. And then if there's certain games where they're hot and they're rolling, you can run more 12 personnel. It's all good. But I think that we're going to have to see this Notre Dame coaching staff adapt their pass game next year, no matter who wins the F or whatever the case may be, because there is nobody that can run the route package that Michael Mayer did the way that he did. They're going to need to do more things where the tight end is a little bit more of a complementary role at times than it was this year, and then allow the production to still be really good, but production where it comes off of because you're using your other position so much. I think that's something we're going to have to see more of next year at the tight end position.
Well, I think 11 personnel makes a lot of sense if Notre Dame's going to use it more than they use it this past season too, Brian, because I mean, like we talked about it, right? You have 4 scholarship receivers coming back, but you have a 4-man class, and depending on what happens in the transfer portal side of things, like you're going to have now starting to get a really dynamic wide receiver room, a really talented one at least, right? So I start looking at that and say, if you run more 11 personnel, one, you can just get more wide receivers on the field naturally, right? Like that's an easy numbers game. But you also, with a offensive line that should be pretty darn good coming back with, hopefully a more consistent quarterback position and the running backs you have coming back, lightening that box a little bit just from a numbers perspective is interesting. Because like you said, if you have promising tight ends, but nothing proven commodity where you don't want to line them up a ton outside to, take advantage of matchups, having a guy like a Mitchell Evans or a Holden Stace at times or a Eli Raritan or whoever it ends up being as kind of that mismatch weapon over the middle of the field against, linebackers and maybe a safety occasionally, like that's an interesting proposition. So I personally just think that 11 personnel makes a lot of sense, but that is barring. I mean, what if we go into the offseason and Holden Stace is just balling all offseason, right? Like, I mean, that could happen because he's that talented, right? What if Kane Barag finally, has a full healthy offseason where he's able to take that step? What happens if Eli has a, quick kind of, well, I don't want to say quick because, that's not going to be super quick, but if he gets back relatively quickly from the ACL and then he's kind of, back where he started and still the athlete that he was before the injury. I mean, there's a lot of variables that are dependent, but I mean, my natural first opinion is that 11 personnel makes a lot of sense because I think that there's a lot of wide receivers next year that you're going to get on the fields, from the Tobias Merriweathers, Deion Colsey's, from the Lorenzo Styles to the incoming freshmen to Jaden Thomas. There's a lot of options at wide receiver. So that'll also make it easier to get more wide receivers involved in the passing game, to get more guys reps, to do all those types of things. So 11 personnel for me is the natural first thing that my mind goes, if I'm being completely honest.
Depending on how they use it. And I think you started to say it without saying it.
Yep. Uh-huh.
If the starting rotation looks something like Deion and Tobias on the outside, then yeah, that's where some of that production goes to. That's where some of that, it's 3rd and 8, who do we go to? And we started to see that late in the year as you were, I see I took it, Ryan. I'm going to let you go with it. I know where you're at, right?
I was just going to say, if you have the Twin Towers outside, you're going to supplement some size that way too, right? Like even outside of production, it's like, where's our safety blanket? Where's our catch radius? Where's that type of insurance blanket?
We started to see that late in the year, Ryan, as teams focus on Michael Mayer, who became the clutch 3rd down guy for Notre Dame last year. It's Deion Colsey.
Yep.
Right. And they did that without Tobias Merriweather. So if Tommy Rees is going to run the offense the way he's run it the last 3 years, in all of its forms and iterations, size on the outside is imperative to it because it just gives you so many options, run game, blocking wise, but also in the pass game. That's something that Tobias Merriweather, who's as skinny as he was, that's an area of the game that he was pretty good at in the times he was in the game. He's a pretty good blocker, I thought. Jaden Thomas developed into a really strong blocker. We're going to talk about Jaden Thomas here in a second. Deion, there's a reason we're leaving Jaden Thomas out for now. But I think you talk about the replacing the production. The easiest answer is the receivers have to produce more. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of that is having a little bit more balance in how the ball is spread out. I think they hurt Michael Mayer by not spreading the ball out more. I think he might have had a few fewer catches, but more yards if they would have protected him a little bit more and allowed other guys to make an impact. Hit Braden Lindsey on some of those deep shots. And all of a sudden you're like, well, you can't have your safeties just coming down on Michael Mayer all day because we're just going to keep banging this deep shot. And that's where not having a quarterback that was either able or willing to throw the ball down the field effectively really hurt Michael Mayer's production. Yeah. So I think having that more outside presence is a must. And that includes, number one, improvement at quarterback. Mm-hmm. No matter if it's a portal guy or someone on the current roster, whoever's a quarterback, it requires that. but then it also means you've got to push Dion and Tobias. You've got to really ride them and do what you need to do to get them ready to go and be more productive players and more key players in your offense. You've got to, forget the whole, well, they've got to earn it. Yes, okay, make them earn it, but push them to earn it. It's okay for coaches to do that. Say, hey, this is who I think we need to have. Let's give those guys a shot, a real good push to see if they can seize it. And if they don't seize it, then somebody else steps into that role. But here's why I think 11 personnel is going to be so impactful. And that is, if you go 11 personnel and do what we just talked about, you have those two kids outside. You'll have, Lorenzo Styles is a guy that can play inside and outside if he comes back. And we expect him to come back as of right now. So we're talking about him. He's a guy that can be an outside guy. You can mix up and put a little bit more speed on the field with him at slot or him outside. Jaden Thomas can still play outside. You're going to have Braylon James coming in, Jaden Greathouse coming in. There's guys that can play outside right away. And then, of course, you have the tight ends. You can replace some of the production with the running backs. But here's the key. Jaden Thomas is the guy that, in my opinion, right now projects best to take some of the specific routes that Michael Mayer was effective on. Because as we saw this season, when Jaden Thomas was at his best, he was working from the slot. Yes. But what he would give you is a little bit more vertical speed, as we saw at times this year against BYU, against Navy, where you can actually threaten the vertical part of the offense a little bit more. And he's a big, strong 215-pound kid that can do some things on the edge of, duo and inside zone where he can get in some guys' ways. You can run some of those like Y screens that you do right now with Mayer. You can run those with Jaden Thomas, where it's not the screens that they're given to him now, where it's like that's not the screen you should get him, but the one where he's catching in the flats and you've got guys blocking downfield for him. That's where a kid like Jaden Thomas can have some impact, working the seams, working the option routes, working the middle of the field, where his strength and size and just unique build can be an asset for you. And so I actually think he right now might be the guy that would most naturally, at least in the bowl game, fit into sort of a let's have some of the stuff we've naturally do be Jaden Thomas. I would love to see in the bowl game Deion Colsey starting at W, Tobias Merriweather starting at X, and have Jaden Thomas at F, and then move Lorenzo all around and just kind of split up the reps between all four of those guys. I would love to see that in the bowl game. And I think that would be good for Tyler Buckner. I think it'd be good for Steve Angeli if he has to play. And I think it would give us a glimpse into what the best alignment this team can have next year from an 11 personnel standpoint. I'd also love to see a lot more 21. I hope in the bowl game we see a lot more balance from a formational personnel standpoint, because you don't have Michael Mayer. But I also think this bowl situation, Ryan, it's the opportunity for Kane Barong. This next few months is like, look, there is no Mayer, there is no Eli Raridan, there is no Kevin Bauman. You have no choice but to give him reps. What does he do with it? Right, is going to be something interesting to see, in my opinion.
Well, and thank you for stopping me, because I was about to go to Jaden Thomas a couple of minutes ago because, I mean, it makes sense, man. Like, it does. I mean, because a lot of what he does well translates to that position, right? Like, he's not a tight end, even though, who was it? Jack Collinsworth that said he was a tight end, or was it Jason Garrett?
It was the guy from the Alabama quarterback, Greg McElroy.
It was Greg McElroy. I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. So, despite what Greg McElroy tried to tell everyone, he's not he's not.
It still wasn't even 14 personnel, even if he has a tight end. They had two running backs on the field. It's just so stupid. It'd have been 23. If you thought he was a tight end, it's 23. It's still not 14. Yes. Under no circumstance was that 14 personnel.
Yeah, it was wild, man.
So it's double stupid.
Yes, it was double stupid. That's a good way to put it. But it still is a very interesting proposition, though, because he does fit a lot of what you need at that position from a passing game perspective, right? And I thought Jaden Thomas really improved as a blocker throughout the season. Like early on, it was just there was effort, but I just don't think it was functionally great. But then towards the course of the season, he became a really valuable player as far as his blocking contributions, working from the slot. And then he's obviously a big body. Like, there's no doubt. And I mean, he showed you some ability to win in a lot of different ways. Like I saw him late in the season. He was breaking off some routes, man, and creating some easy separation. It was great to see. You saw him win some seams. You even saw him win a couple 50-50 balls outside, which was nice to see, right? So as a guy that could be like a versatile movement-based chess piece a little bit, Jaden fits that, I think, right? So you have to understand exactly what your strategy is with him. You can't ask him to be something he's not, which they did in parts of the season. But if you ask Jaden Thomas to be what he is, I think he can be a valuable asset to him. Call him a Swiss Army knife, call him an F, call him whatever you want. The point blank period to it though is that he is a movement based player that can provide mismatch potential for an offense. So I think it makes a lot of sense. But again, that is dependent upon, are you going to get the skyscrapers outside, right? Like you need to get those guys outside to make this work. But I think it can work as incredibly well. And yes, I'm not going to echo your sentiment to 21 personnel too much, Brian, because we've both been kind of pounded on it for the entire year, right? But I really do like the option for Jaden Thomas. And I think that it's an opportunity to be very, very creative in the bowl game for Tommy Rees if he wants to be.
Well, I mean, we saw this year from Jaden. I'm looking at the Pro Football Focus breakdown of how he lined up, and he lined up 185 snaps in the slot and 70 outside. And I just feel like that's where he's best. I think that's where he works best. I think that's where you can use him, and that's where he could become a really impressive third down weapon. And, you look at his numbers, and they have him down here for – let's see here. What did he have? 20 catches on the year, Ryan? 15 of them went for first downs, according to Pro Football Focus. That's a really good rate. Now, I mean, receivers, you're going to be over half, right? I mean, but that's 75% of your catches you're going for a first down. Why? Because that is that money. I really felt as a quarterback, when I had a tight end or a slot that was really good, that's the best third down weapon you can have. Because the best because that's a lot of third down is also a down and distance where teams like to bring pressure. And having that guy over the middle is huge. And it doesn't have to be a tight end. And I think that's where Jaden Thomas could be a really effective weapon. Let Dion and Tobias and Lorenzo and the freshmen get all that, down the field and maybe some of that big love. But when it's third down and 5, it's like everybody in the stadium kind of knows, watch out for 83 on this play. And it's those plays that help you are the difference between being a good offense and a great offense is having the guys that can do all the different types of things, not just having one guy that does everything like we saw from Michael Mayer. Right. And I think that's where I felt at times they didn't necessarily do justice to Michael Mayer because they didn't do more to take some of the burden off of him, which I think would have upped his production and made them a much better offense. I also feel that Notre Dame felt they were limited at quarterback and didn't feel that they could do that at times. And that's just the reality of it. So it's going to be an interesting battle. I think, as we said, there's plenty of options to sort of replace the production, but the production should get spread around more is really what it comes down to.
Yes.
Let's move over to the Viper position, Ryan. Isaiah Foskey obviously departs as the Notre Dame's all-time sack leader, had 14 tackles for loss this season, 11 sacks, 1 forced fumble, takes with him 26 and a half career sacks and 7 career forced fumbles. Not surprised that he left, Ryan, although you and I would have probably sat here and made we'd have had a debate about whether or not he should or shouldn't have come back. I think you could have made a case that he should have, but he didn't. He is off to the NFL. And now Notre Dame has a big glaring hole at the Viper position. And it's going to be very interesting to see who comes back. So I think the first guy we're going to talk about when you talk about replacing Isaiah Foskey is a guy that has his own NFL decision. And that's Justin Ademiola. So we'll kind of have a stay or go conversation about Justin first. Then we'll talk about filling out the Viper need sort of second, because I think those two things tie together, Ryan. The first things first is Justin Ademiola does have a decision to make, right? Does he come back for a 6th season or does he go pro and take the best chance? And I think the first question that you'll ask is, okay, can coming back improve his draft stock? I'm going to make a case, Ryan. You tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Sure.
Justin is not going to come back and be a significantly better athlete or rangier athlete or anything like that. So he's not going to improve his draft stock there. However, part of a draft stock, in my view, again, I'm asking my draft guy if I'm right or wrong, is you got to show you can be the guy. And Justin has shown he can be a Swiss Army knife that can literally play all over the field, including lining up at Mike linebacker at times. But I think him coming back, if that's the route Notre Dame goes, I think being a first and second down Viper, showing you can be an edge player and be an impact player and then produce at a higher level, that's the opportunity to me that would make a lot of sense. And then that takes some of the burden off of Josh Burnham having to be the guy, or Aiden Gobire to be the guy, or takes the burden off of going out and getting a transfer portal guy.
Right.
And having to see what he can do and how he can transition. To me, the best victory they could have at Viper this offseason, other than, somehow convincing Keon Keeley to come, which is not happening, is to convince Justin Adamiola to come back and be bought in. Now, for Justin, it's okay. Do I want to go through a 6-year? Like, he's always been with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's two appealing aspects to this. Number one is I do think him proving he can be three aspects. One, for me, well, first of all, Ryan, the production part. I asked you a question and then talked right through you. So sorry. The part about, I think showing he can be an every down guy and showing he can produce at a higher level, I think is where Justin could see his draft stock raise. Is that right or wrong way of looking at it?
No, it's very right, because what stats do for you, Brian, in the box score production is it grabs attention, right? Like a scout's going to look through that and be like, oh, Justin Adamiola had 9 sacks for Notre Dame this year. Like, probably need to give him a look, right? And then from there, it's how does he get to that production? For guys like Isaiah Foskey, it's easy to see, right? Because he's 6'5", 260 with long arms, length for days, and athleticism. Like, that's easy. With Justin, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because he's 6'2", 250 something, somewhere in that ballpark. Not the longest guy, not the most explosive guy. But what Justin does have is he has nuance to his game, which is really interesting, right? He's got hands that are among the best on the team. He understands how to attack leverage. He understands how to soften angles. He understands those things. So the more production you have, then teams are going to look at it and say, well, how did you get that production? Well, you got to that production because you have a nuance to your game. You have a pass rush plan. You have good hands. And those things, if he has them, is a sticking points, right? To make an NFL roster, you need a sticking point. A lot of guys, pass rushers especially, they stick because they have these crazy traits that you're going to be like, I can develop that, right? For a guy like Justin Adamiola, he's a more known commodity, right? He's got a higher floor player that maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling of all time, but the floor and the sticking point is based upon the ability to win with his understanding of how to play the position. So that will help him stick no matter what. But in order to really grab people's attention, for a guy that maybe doesn't have the greatest traits in the world, it's going to be, can you produce, right? Can you make the most out of opportunities? And I think that is a big opportunity.
That's my
if he
point.
chooses to come back. Yeah.
That's my point. It's like he has shown he can be a Swiss Army knife. You can line him up at big end at Viper. You can line him up over the guards and he can win. You can line him up a Mike linebacker and he can do some things. He can drop and cover a wheel route. He's shown he can do all those things. What he has not shown, and what I think he really needs to show, because here's the difference between being drafted in the 7th round or being a really high priority camp invite, or maybe a guy that can sneak into early day 3, is to say, which is you've got a much better shot at making a roster spot. You have a much better, you're clearly valued, is you showed the Swiss Army knife part, come back to Notre Dame and show that you can be the guy and be a guy that produces 7, 8, 9 sacks next year. And the second part of it too is they're looking for leadership next year. They will be. And you talk about Jason was a leader of this team. Foskey was a captain. You've got other guys that were considered leaders, but I think Justin is one of those kids who has an opportunity to kind of step into that leadership role, because he and Jason have very different personalities in that regard. Jason is a very intense, fiery, competitive guy, and Justin is more of the thoughtful. Like, Justin's a pretty intense guy in his motor and work ethic. I'm talking kind of verbally, and from you talk to different sources on the program, it was always Justin calming Jason down because Jason just had that intensity. Justin, to me, has more of the captain type of personality to me. Mm-hmm. And then the third part of this is they are very close brothers. They've been together their whole careers. I do think there's some benefit to Justin kind of showing, hey, Jason's gone. I'm not a twin. I'm not part of the twins anymore. I'm always the twin, but I'm now the Adamiola that's here. I'm the one. Right. I'm the captain. I'm the guy that can be the leader of this team. I'm the one that can kind of be the bridge between the present and the future and provide all that. So I think all of those things factor into why I think he should come back for a 6th year. I do believe, from talking to sources, that Notre Dame definitely wants him back for a 6th year. Mm-hmm. He's just got to make the decision whether or not he wants to come back. The only drawback to me to coming back is risk of injury, but you could get injured at the pro day, and then you're really screwed. I mean, that's happened how many times? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think he should come back. I think if he does, I think that's a huge boost for the Notre Dame defense, of course. But I also think it's good for him as well. I really do.
I did. Yeah. I mean, because I understand that he's always been with his brother thing. Like, I get that, but going to the next level, your odds of staying together are very slim, right? Like, it's most likely not going to happen. So I think that separation is scary, and I totally get it. You know, for a person that has twins on both sides of my family, like, I completely understand it. But I think that Justin can get a lot out of it, Brian, because to your point, he has a floor, right? Like, next year, he's not going to get more athletic. He's not going to get longer. Like, those things aren't going to happen. But in order to really raise his stock and to be that guy, the production is needed. Like, it is, right? It's easy to look past the player if they don't have a ton of production. It is. So I think that it will provide a bunch of leadership. We've talked a lot about a couple of the young Vipers on the team that we're excited about, but Justin's a much more known commodity, which will help, and not only help just from a short-term perspective, from a production perspective, but it'll also help Joshua Burnham, Aiden Gobira, to continue to learn from someone like Justin Amalola, who's been here now for, it would be his 6th season, and he's been through the ringer. He's been on really good teams. He's had the struggles. He's had the triumphs. He's had everything in between of being a part-time player and now being the starter and now being the guy and being a key rotational player. He can provide a lot for just the young defensive ends in his own room, on top of being a leader on the defense potentially.
Sorry about that, Ryan. I kept hearing this weird buzzing noise, and I kept thinking, like, it's like something in my ear. I took it out, and it was I won't say her name because she'll wake up, but it was RITA. It's just snoring like a buzzsaw right now over there, because it's snowing and they're kind of having a rough day today. So I decided to leave the door open so they could come down. So Sadie's sleeping over here on the little dog bed, but the other one is laying on the floor, just snoring her head off. So I didn't know. I thought that I was getting some feedback in the mic because I'm like, it's like.
I thought you were a beekeeper for a second. You had some hives down there.
No, it's the other one. So Viper, let's talk about the rest of Viper. Mm-hmm. So if he comes back, I think things fall into place. Jordan Botelho becomes a rotational guy, a niche guy to me. And then you just need one of Josh Burnham or Aiden Gobira to really step up, in my opinion. And we're going to focus on kind of what's on the roster now. We'll talk about potentially getting a transfer guy next. But I think that would be an ideal thing. The thing about Jordan Botelho is I just don't know if Jordan Botelho is an every down player. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he has the discipline as a player to be an every down guy. And he was also pretty inconsistent this year. There were times he looked really good, and at times he was incredibly blockable. Mm-hmm. And you just don't know what you're going to get from him on a week-to-week basis. And I think that's something that still, for me, is concerning for me, is just that trust factor there for me is not there. And so Justin coming back to me does help, because now you can use Jordan in more of that niche role where I think he thrives. And then you don't have to have Josh Burnham become a 40 snap a game guy unless he earns it.
Right.
You know, and so I think it does take some of that burden off the younger players if Justin comes back. If he doesn't come back, Ryan, then Viper becomes a much different conversation. And people ask what Viper is. Viper is the weak side defensive end in Notre Dame's defense. It's what they call that position. If Justin Ademilola does come back, all of a sudden this position gets thrown in flux, in my opinion. You'll have Botelho potentially battling for a starting job. I could see Junior Tuihalamaka playing more there as he did late in the year. I don't love him there, to be honest with you. I don't think it's his best position, but it's kind of out of necessity to get more bodies there. And then, of course, you would have the other freshmen, Josh Burnham and Jordan Botelho. Aiden Gobira. Mm-hmm. I still feel like Aiden is a year away, but it's hard for me to say that without saying what his next 6 to 8 months looks like in the weight room. He may be one of those kids that just one full off season, and he blows up. Because he didn't show up till he was a summer kid. He was not an early enrollee, correct? Aiden was, I believe, a summer guy. So he didn't get the whole last winter. He may be a guy that just the winter just blows him up. I mean, he may be. I can only go off of where he is now. He's twitchy. Sure. He's long. He's got really impressive natural strength, but he's thin. and he's not really necessarily ready to be a 20 to 30 snap a game guy today. That may change by next year, but we can only go off what today. Burnham, I think when you look at him, is much closer to that, in my opinion, physically. For him, it's just learning how to play the position. He was a quarterback, middle linebacker. He's learning how to use his hands. And I think that's another area where Justin Ademilola could have a big impact on this football team. I could be wrong about this, but Justin strikes me as the kind of guy that isn't just I'm going to go do my thing kind of guy. He strikes me as someone who's going to also coach up the younger kids, especially if you're going to allow him to play one position more than he has the last few years. As a Viper, is he could be a guy that could as Al Washington or Al Golden's talking to somebody else, he could be back there with Aiden Gobira, with Josh Burnham, talking about the different things, because he's a very, as you mentioned, he is a very technically skilled player. Justin Ademilola is. Yeah. And so I think that's an area where he could have a big impact, not just on what he does, but some of the production that happens when he's lined up somewhere else or off the field could have a direct impact, could be directly impacted by his leadership and what he can kind of give to those younger players. I think that's another area where Justin Ademilola could have a huge impact, because if whether a combination of Al Golden, Al Washington, and Justin Ademilola, I don't care what the combination is, but if y'all can figure out a way to get Josh Burnham ready to kind of slide into that year 2 Isaiah Foskey role, because remember, Isaiah Foskey redshirted as a freshman, played a couple games, right? It's a redshirt. Then he comes out as a second-year player, and he's a rotational guy behind Dalen Hayes and Adetokunbo Ogundiji, has 4.5 sacks, shows some twitchiness, blocks a punt, and you're like, hey, this kid's got a chance to be special. Then in year 3, he blows up. I could see Josh Burnham being on a very similar trajectory. I don't think it'd be good for Josh Burnham to be the guy in year 2 at a position he's never played until this season. I think having that bridge, and that's what I meant by the bridge for Justin Ademilola, could be the bridge between the present and the future. And then next year, here's what I predict. Justin Ademilola comes back and adopts a leadership role in the standpoint of it's not just about me and what I can do, but also what I can do for the kids around me. Sure. You're going to hear this story in 2024. Josh Burnham breaks out, and he's this kid who's just blowing up and having sacks, or Aiden Gobira, one of those two kids, or maybe both, blow up and they're killing it, or one of them's killing it. And what you're going to hear in press conferences is, I learned so much playing with Justin last year. He had a big impact on who I am. And we've heard that before. Isaiah Foskey would say things like that about Dalen and Adi and those guys, right? And that's another way that true leaders leave their mark on a program. It's like, look, your impact doesn't end when the great ones, their impact doesn't end when they leave. Their impact carries over. And then Josh Burnham in a couple of years becomes that veteran that's teaching guys those type of things. And then who did he learn that from? And then that's how you have a true lasting impact. I think that's what Justin could do, because I do believe Josh Burnham has a chance to be special. I think Aiden Gobira has a chance to be a really good player. If he really takes the weight room, I could see them kind of both playing at the same time in a little bit of a different type of 4-down look. But the thing about Josh Burnham is he brings so much. You can line him up all over the field, because he is a linebacker. He does run like a linebacker. He does move like a linebacker, Ryan. Is now you can do some different stuff with him, where now at times you could have him and Justin on the field together. And now Justin can do what Foskey did, and then Josh can take over sort of that Swiss Army knife role that Justin had on 3rd down. You know what I mean? And so I think that's where, but you lose that ability if Justin leaves. Sure. And then you kind of got to force feed those guys into those roles, and that's ideally not where you want to be. And that's when you're almost to the position, Ryan, where you're forced to say, okay, we've got to go get a portal guy. Right.
No, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, look, I am as excited about Joshua Burnham and Aiden Gobira's future as probably anybody in Notre Dame land in here, right? But I mean, you're not wrong, Brian. Like, that's a position where some guys just aren't ready as sophomores, and it's not bad. I mean, especially again, Joshua Burnham was playing linebacker last spring for the most part, right? Like, he was just, kind of developing and continuing to see his body grow, and then he makes that switch. And you look at guys that are incredibly talented, but the nuance of that position is something that we don't talk about enough, right? Like, I feel like we talk so much about, the length, which for good reason, right? The athleticism for good reason. You're not lacking in talent in that room, right? If Justin Ademilola doesn't come back, you have Jordan Botelho, Joshua Burnham, and Aiden Gobira, who are all different players, but they're all incredibly talented in their own ways, right? Like Jordan Botelho is incredibly explosive. Joshua Burnham is long, explosive, and can change direction. Aiden Gobira is super long and twitched up. Like all three of those guys have traits where you look at and say, like, that could be a dude if things kind of strike well. But the nuance of the position is something that we don't give enough credit to. The plan of attack, the hand usage, the nuance in that regard could go a long way. Because, I mean, I mentioned it already, and you just mentioned it again, and I don't want to harp on it too much, but just Joshua Burnham watching a Justin Ademilola in front of him and then picking his brain on why he does a certain thing he does, that's invaluable. And it's stuff that we don't talk about enough, but truly is like, it's something to work from. And I think that he's the perfect player also to come back to, Brian, because it's like, so if let's say one of those guys is working with Isaiah Foskey, for instance, this year, right? Isaiah is incredibly explosive, incredibly talented. We don't have to talk much about him, right? Length. He's not incredibly nuanced football player, though, from a technical perspective, right? Watching him is not going to make Joshua Burnham 6'5", 260 with vines. Like, that's not going to make it there. But him watching Justin Ademilola will help with his hand usage, will help him understand how to do the certain things he's doing. Like, that's where you are now.
He may get there. I mean, he's got the vines. The point is what Isaiah could teach him is, hey, man, here's how you just come off and say I'm better than the dude. Right. But at the end of the day, that's also why Isaiah wasn't as consistently impactful this season, is because he didn't have that repertoire of different things. And I think if you could take a guy that has that skill set and teach him, like if you could take a kid that's as twitchy as Josh Burnham and give him the nuance that Justin Ademilola brings to the table, that's a phenomenal football player. And if Josh Burnham and Aiden Gobira are the kids that I believe they are and have been told they are, they're going to be sponges with the Justin Ademilola. They're going to want that from him. And so they're very coachable kids. And so I think that's where he can have a huge impact, in my opinion. Huge impact. But again, if he's gone, then all of a sudden the Viper position it's a boomer. It could be a boomer bust position.
Yes.
You know, and that's the concern, because there's the risk of it busting, and now you've got to take a guy out of the Mike competition that should be in the Mike. And with all due respect to J.D. Bertrand and Maris Luafau and Jack Kaiser, none of those guys should go into this bowl game, much less the offseason, like, yeah, I got my spot. None of them, including J.D., who I thought was the best of all three of them. You want to have Junior there in that battle at Mike linebacker, but you almost are forced to put him at Viper as part of that conversation if you don't. Here's the wild card for me, Ryan. You and I spent a lot of time this offseason talking about Maris Luafau, and all of our sources talked about how good this kid is going to be and how dynamic he is. And anyone that's seen that kid in person knows he's really long and he's incredibly athletic. But the thing you have to come to grips with now, and this is what we're doing, he just has not shown the instincts to be a linebacker in a read and react defense. He is a you go here kind of guy. And that's what he is. I just don't know if you can say, well, let's just see if the light goes on in year 5. You almost have to think, if Justin Ademilola leaves, do you look at him like, to me, Maris Luafau needs to have 1 or 2 roles. If Justin comes back, then Maris basically needs to be the new Bo Bauer. Means you're a special teams warrior and you're a third down pass rusher. That's what Bo Bauer's role was at Notre Dame. If Justin doesn't come back, then I would argue you need to have him as in that Bo Bauer role, but also a guy that in downs 1 and 2 could maybe line up and be more of an edge player and more of a kind of a 3-3-5 kind of thing, but you're more just bringing him off the edge. That's when he was most effective in the games where he struggled. When he did have those good moments, it was when he just came up and lined off the edge. He's not an ideal every down edge. He's not strong enough, powerful enough, or whatever to play that every down, but I think there can be a role for him. So I think how he is used next year is going to be very telling, unless the light bulb goes off. I mean, that's the other thing too, right? The light bulb could go on and Maris could be the guy we always thought he could be, but I can't assume that's going to be the case after 4 seasons at Notre Dame. I mean, he missed last year, but there's 3 other seasons where he should have been a little bit more instinctive than he is, and you just have to start asking yourself, maybe he's just not, And so you have to plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yep.
You have to plan for that light not going on, and then who steps into that role if it doesn't at will. But then also you can't just say, okay, Marist, you're not playing Will. Sorry. He's too twitchy, too athletic, and too physical to not have a role. And that's why I say that Bo Bauer role, which was a very underrated role the last few years. And, you didn't really think about it, but the first time I thought about it, man, I wish we would have had Bo Bauer in that third down situation was against USC as you're watching Caleb Williams run around. Yeah. I would have liked seeing Bo Bauer maybe chasing him a little bit in some of those situations. So that's something that you have to think about too when you look at, is there a niche role for him? Because I think that's what Marist has to be based on what we saw this year. He's got to be a niche guy, not an every down guy. And a niche guy is being told what to do. And that's where Marist has thrived, is when he's just being told what to line up and do that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we are where we are, right? But I agree with you, Brian. He's too volatile of a player to depend on him from a snap to snap basis like he is. It's the same. It's kind of a similar thing to Jordan Patelho for different reasons, right? You love the peaks, you love the athleticism, you love the talent, but he's not trustworthy at the moment. So having a simplified, specific role for a player like that, I think it makes a ton of sense, because I want people to understand this, right? Because I've seen this a lot in the chat over the last few weeks, is just, take Marist off scholarship, never plays again. No, that's not what we're doing, folks. Marist Liufau is much too talented not to play.
He's much too athletic. I think is the word we need to start using more for him.
Yes.
Because I don't think he's shown a lot of football talent at this point in time. He's shown a lot of athleticism.
Sure.
And to me, that's different. That's different to me. Talent to me shows some sort of football talent, and he just hasn't shown that, in my opinion.
I would like to think that a good defensive coordinator, who I still think Al Golden is, right? A good defensive staff, which I think Notre Dame has a lot of smart defensive guys on the staff, should be able to look at Marist Liufau and his athleticism that he has and say, you might not be this, but you can do that. Right? You can do these little things that can help our team win, whether that is as a designated pass rusher, whether that is as a must rush linebacker on obvious third down situations, whether that is as a on-ball specific player, whether that is as a delayed blitz, whatever the role is. I think that he does have that talent, and I do think that he can give you some reps on the edge at times. I agree. He's not a full edge. He's 6'2", 6'2" and some change, and 235 pounds. He's not a big player, but he is long. He is explosive, and I do think that there is a role for him. It's just about maximizing and being understanding and say, what can he do for me? Not what can't he do for me. We understand at this point what he probably can't do, but there's still things that he can do, which can be valuable.
But it does leave you in a situation where you've got to find some answers because if you lose Isaiah and Justin, it really puts you in a bind there. If Justin comes back, I start feeling a lot better about what this defensive line is going to look like next year. I do. Will it be great? No. Will it be a high motor group? Yes. Will it have an impact player like it's had in recent seasons? Probably not, which is a little bit concerning, unless somebody kind of breaks out. Riley Mills finally has that breakout, which he hasn't done yet. I thought Riley was solid this year. I did. I think he gets beat up on too much by fans for some reason, but he was a solid player this year. But I do think you won't have that guy, but I think you might have a chance to be a little bit better and consistent across the board is what I think we could see. And then your stars are on the second and third level potentially of this defense. So, yeah. So anyway, I think those are the things that to me, I look at it and see as that's where the Viper position is right now. Of course, they need to look at the portal,
Yes.
And so I think that getting a guy on the portal that's going to really have an impact is like a Foskey type of impact. I just don't think that is there. I don't think, they're recruiting Deshaun McCullough. I just don't think that, I don't know if that's where he's going to go, we'll see. right? But right now, I don't think that's what's going to end up happening. The McCullough's always kind of been package deals in the past, which is why he didn't go to Ohio State in the first place. He went to play with his older brother and his dad. Now his younger brother, where's his younger brother going to go? So if they can change that and get him at Notre Dame, great, but if not, I don't know if Truman Jones necessarily moves the needle and all of a sudden, hey, wow, like you've got the next Isaiah Foskey here. He could fill maybe some of the role that Justin Adamiola would have had.
Sure.
But, so there's that kind of guy out there, but there's not a Isaiah Foskey, Will Anderson type of player out there for Notre Dame to get in the portal. That's the reality of it.
Yep. No, I mean, it is what it is, right? I still think that look, if a Justin Adamiola doesn't come back and you have to fill the void of a veteran leader, Truman Jones, from Harvard maybe could do that for you, but you're still going to have to count on the young guys being dudes, right? Like, I mean, they're going to have to step up majorly because I agree, Brian, like even if they get to Sean McCullough, who I think is an incredibly talented football player, and I would love him at Notre Dame, is he going to be the every down player from day one? Like, I don't know that, right? Like, he showed a lot of flashes in his 1 year at Indiana, but you don't even know if he's going to be that guy from day one. He's going to add more talent in the room, but I would argue that there's not a lack of talent in the Viper room at all, right? But so, I mean, even if you get McCullough, I'm still kind of wondering what does the top of the team look like at the defense, at the Viper position. I think that he can be that guy potentially, but I still think he's a little bit of a wait and see if he can be that guy early on in his career. But it's going to be a tricky one. Because I don't think, I mean, just looking at some of the guys in the portal over the last couple of days, I don't think that there's that headliner guy, right?
No.
If you also have Deshaun McCullough to be a mix and match guy with some of the other talents, but otherwise you're probably just getting a depth piece that might have a veteran aspect to him. Right. So it does get a little funky of a situation, but there are a couple targets out there, but it'd be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
And there's a great question by John A1 about changing the Viper position too, which we'll get into in the mailbag, because I do want to get to some of the stay or go stuff first. But I do think that that's an impact on it. So we're going to wrap up with sort of the thoughts on Justin Adamiola. Okay. End of the day, stay or go for Justin Adamiola. I believe he needs to stay. We wrapped up that conversation with a lot of the stuff about the leadership and how he can bridge the impact. But what can't get lost is what we said at the beginning, the very first thing we talked about. There's just a lot Justin Adamiola still has to show that he can be, right? Sure. He has to show that he's not just a Swiss Army knife that can play all over. He's not just a hard worker with a great motor. He's got to show he can produce. He's got to show he can be a first, second, and third down player at one spot. Because here's the deal. If you can show that, like the Swiss Army knife thing, the leadership, the character, that gets you maybe into round 7, in my opinion, with his lack of measurables. The NFL cares about whether you think they should or shouldn't. They care about that. That gets him maybe into round 7. Priority free agent range. If you can show you are that, plus you're someone and you've got the repertoire and all that stuff, but you're also someone that showed that I can line up and be a legitimate edge player that can get after the quarterback and he can flash that. Because here's the thing that moving him all around, I think somewhat disguised just how fundamentally sound and nuanced, not even fundamentally sound because that almost seems limiting, just how advanced his pass rush repertoire was somewhat hindered by the fact he had to move around so much. He can't do the things I think he could do on tackles when he's lined up over the guard.
Sure.
Right? He has to do something different. He has to just kind of bull his way through under a guy's shoulder, under a guy's armpit kind of thing. Prove that you can be an every down edge rusher. If you can prove that you can be an edge rusher on first and second down, that's going to vault. I mean, that's right there. That's like 20 bonus points on an NFL draft grade card, in my opinion, Ryan. And so that's the thing too, is he has to prove he can be it. He's proven he's got the work ethic, the attitude, the leadership, the versatility to be a guy that, hey, let's draft him in the 7th round or make him a priority free agent. If he can show me that he can produce at a high level, then okay, now all of a sudden, okay, let's take a deeper look at this kid. That's the biggest reason why I think Justin Adamiola comes back. The other stuff is a benefit to him coming back to the team, But there's no question that, and I don't think, you could say he could go in the portal and be a 6-year guy somewhere else. I don't think that helps because now you're learning a new defense, what a new coach wants, all those type of things. Come here, stay here, be that guy, be that dude, and do it out of your brother's shadow and Foskey's shadow and all that. That's the biggest benefit to Justin Adamiola to come back.
And there's opportunity in front of him at Notre Dame. Like, I don't know why you would transfer when there are questions at the Viper position, right? Like, there is opportunities to be that guy here in a system that in a place you've been for 5 years. So I think that there's a lot of reasons for Justin to come back, and I think it would be very beneficial of him. Obviously, it's his decision at the end of the day. We'll see what he decides, but I do think it would be very beneficial for him to come back because I do think there's a lot that he can still prove during his Notre Dame career.
Let's move into some other players, Ryan, that need to have sort of stay or go decisions.
Sure.
A unique one for me is Brandon Joseph. So Brandon Joseph came to Notre Dame from Northwestern. He was an All-American in 2020. Excellent player. Disappointing 2021 season. I know you were fired up about him. You convinced me eventually. I had some reservations. He was not really healthy most of this year. He's banged up most of this year. Didn't really show a whole lot, in my opinion. I think there's a twofold argument to him, Ryan. Number one is, should he come back? And should you bring him back? Are two completely different conversations for me.
Sure.
And I guess kind of part of it depends on, are you definitely confident that you're going to get Peyton Bowen on signing day? If you are, then I would honestly say move on. If you're not, then maybe you try to convince him to come back. But I just kind of feel like, Ryan, with Brandon Joseph, it's really hard for me to gauge the value he brings just because he just hasn't been a really good football player the last 2 years. And now you start to wonder, was 2020, the COVID year and all that, the anomaly, and this is more who he is? Or is he just struggling to get that year back? I mean, because you have to say there's been more snaps of him in college as an okay safety than there are snaps of him in college as a great safety.
Sure. And that's fair. I mean, Brian, like, this one comes down to I think there was a heart-to-heart conversation that has with Brandon Joseph, right? And I think that it's not just with Chris O'Leary, right? It's a Marcus Freeman sitting down and being like, let's be real about this, man. Let's be real. You weren't great this year. You had moments, right? Like Syracuse. You had a great game against Syracuse, right? You had some flashes against Ohio State that were impressive and exciting. But throughout the entirety, you did not live up to maybe what the expectations were to begin the year. Why is that, right? Let's talk it out. Tell me what you're thinking. And from there, I think a conversation starts. And I think, honestly, at the end of the day, Brian, for me, it comes down to, as a coaching staff, how much do you trust him if he wants to come back, right? If you trust him and what he's telling you, and there were some circumstances that were standing in way of him being the player that maybe he can be, then I think I would be open to him potentially coming back. But I don't know the answer to that one, though, because I don't talk to Brandon Joseph on a day-to-day basis. I don't know what makes him tick. I don't know what his work ethic's like. Like, I don't know those things, right? I don't. I do know that later in the season, it seemed to me like he was taking some plays off. Like, that's what it seemed like to me. It seemed like there wasn't a ton of effort over the last few games. Like, that's what I see, right? But I don't talk to him every single day. So I think that there's a heart-to-heart that needs to come to fruition here, because I think he's in a tough spot because he'll get drafted. He's going to get drafted.
Sure.
Probably more of a mid-round guy comparative to what I thought he could be at one point. But he'll get drafted because he does have still some ball production in college. He has good ball skills. He's shown those types of things in flashes during his career. I mean, not in flashes. I mean, the guy has, 10 interceptions in his career?
2020 was not a flash. I mean, that was a whole season. I mean,
Yes.
He didn't just have a
Like,
couple good games. It was a whole season.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So he has the ball production to stand by. He has the moment flashes during this season, although it was very few and far between. But he is now a player that you're a mid to late round guy. That's what you are right now. So generally, I would say that guy needs to go back to school, right? I mean, that makes most sense. A guy is a mid-round pick. You need to go back to school, increase your draft stock more than likely, right? At a safety position. And he isn't in that position though right now because I think that heart needs to happen if it hasn't happened already. Like there needs to be a comfortability. If there's not comfort, then we're not like this is even a conversation to have, right? You move on, whether that's him declaring for the draft, whether he ends up going to a different school. Like I don't know what the outcome of that one is, but if you don't trust him, you move on. Simple as that. If you do, right. I would give it a deep thought, and we would have that conversation at that point. But regardless, you need to understand what happened this year, what makes him tick, what the issue was, what's the deal, man? Because the games where he came out and he looked pumped up, like, I mean, Brian, we were both at Syracuse, right? Like, you saw him in pregame and he was getting some juice into those boys, man. And then he had his best game of the season by a large. Why did that not
Ohio
happen?
State were clearly his two best games.
Why did that not happen more regularly? I need to understand that.
Could it have been injury related, right? That's the thing. Like, was the effort not there late because he just didn't feel comfortable on a leg or something? You know, he didn't feel comfortable if there was, I don't know if there was a shoulder injury that we don't know about.
Sure.
You have to know all those things that we don't know. So we've got to admit what we don't know, right? I mean, and what we don't know is why did he look like you said, Ryan? Is it he didn't want to hurt himself because of the draft? Is it he was gutting it out and that's the best he could give and he just didn't have, you know, there's a lot of things you have to ask yourself that we don't know, that the staff, to your point, the staff will know that, and it'll go a long way towards what direction they want to go with him.
And it's really fascinating, Brian, because I would say this, right? Definitely wasn't as good in 2021 as 2020. Like it wasn't even close. But when you watched the 2021 film, I watched a few games. I know you did as well. Did you ever have any effort issues with him? Like that was nothing that I ever saw. It was like bad technique as a tackler at points.
Even 2021 you're talking about, right? Yeah, yes. It was never really about effort.
No.
But so what you don't know is weird. Okay, was it this year about the NFL draft is right around the corner, or like I said, were there injuries that were part of it? Was there, you know, an uncertainty in the defense that would be gone in year two of the I mean, there's so many different things to look at, Ryan, that we don't know. So we can't say for sure, nope, move on because he doesn't care, doesn't want to be here. I can't say that.
Right. Exactly.
I can tell you what it looked like. I can't tell you the reasons why. I don't have really intel to share on that one right now. You know what I mean? I can just tell you what I saw was not a really good football player that you couldn't trust to be out there every day. And that's something, you know, so like if you feel that this current safety class is going to stay together, and it's not a hint to any people are going to take it that way. It's just a hypothetical because they're not signed yet. Right. If you feel this safety class is going to stay together, Peyton Bowen, Adon Schuler, Ben Minich, then I would say I would actually be comfortable saying, okay, move on and then get Xavier, get Ramon, and then the young kids kind of coached up. And then I would take a corner, and whether it's Ryan Barnes, whether it's Clarence Lewis, I would take a corner and consider moving him into that role as well, safety role as well, to compete for a job. That's what I would do. And so, because, you know, I don't want to thrust freshmen into that role, but I mean, the reality is would you be shocked at all if Peyton Bowen literally took Brandon Joseph's spot next year? And I'm not talking just safety. I'm talking safety and punt returner. Yeah. Would you be shocked if he took that role next year? I wouldn't.
No. And I wouldn't be shocked if he was a freshman All-American next year. Like he's that type of dude, you know, like I wouldn't be shocked at all. Yeah.
And so I'd rather kind of go with that than to move on, than to take another chance on an older guy that you're not sure what the buy-in is.
Yeah.
So here's the final question, Ryan. Let's just say hypothetical, folks. Yep. Let's say hypothetically Notre Dame says, hey, Brandon, we think it's time for us both to move on. If you're Brandon Joseph, do you go pro and just take your chances there, test well, do all that? Or do you maybe transfer somewhere else for a fifth year?
I think that in that situation, I would go pro if I was him, because just from intel on the NFL side, right? Like he's not the early rounder that once was maybe theorized, but he's still a kid that I know for a fact has a major all-star game invites, right? If he chooses to come out. So he's still going to have opportunities in the draft process. And honestly, and this is just my opinion, I'm not quoting any, scouts that I've talked to or any personnel or anything like that, but being at 3 different schools, I start to kind of raise an eyebrow like, why have you been at 3 different schools, bud? Like, that's a little concerning to me, right? So at this point, he's going to be a graduate. He's going to have his degree. He's going to have all those things, right? Because he was close to that before he even transferred to Notre Dame. So having your degree, 4-year player, I think that for me, if that was it was either transfer or to go pro. If I was Brandon Joseph, I feel like I would bet on myself and I would try to go pro.
Agree. No, I think that there's one other safety that has a potentially an extra year. That's DJ Brown. I think you and I both agree that it's time for DJ to, either take a shot in the NFL or move on.
Yep.
I think that's definitely for me the way to go.
Yeah.
Secondary wise, Cam Hart's already decided to come back, so that's obviously big. And there really is nobody else that's got a draft decision in the third level. Defensive line wise, I mean, we could maybe mention Riley Mills or Howard Cross as now draft eligible players. Howard Cross is obviously a senior, but I think they're both guys that should come back. And I mean, that's not really a discussion. Yep. Linebacker, I kind of feel like that's another one where unless they're told to, hey, maybe you should move on, which I have not been told that that's going to happen with any of those linebackers. None of those guys have draft decisions. I think there's just not a lot of draft decisions really to be made that would make sense. I think the only other one would be offensively. When you look at a guy like a Braden Lindsey, does the staff try to bring him back? Like, okay, do you go to the portal and get a guy, or do you try to convince Braden Lindsey to come back for a 6th year? Or do you just trust with what you have in your young guys coming in next year? I think those are the questions in the debate that you have. I think it's kind of time for him to take his shot. You've had 2 healthy years. A kid who had some injury history in the past, you've had 2 healthy years. Go run really fast at the pro day. And because look, maybe he comes back next year, but it would most likely, this was the year where he had a chance to be the guy.
Sure.
I think next year it'll be harder for him to be the guy. He just would be a part of the rotation next year. I feel bad for him. I actually think that he's going to have some film that NFL teams are going to like this year. Because they're going to put him in the film like, dude, this guy's open. No, he didn't catch a lot of balls, but this guy's open all the time down the field. I don't know why he didn't get the ball more. I just feel like with Braden and just kind of how the season played out, the niche that he's kind of found himself in at Notre Dame, which I don't quite understand. I think it's best for him to for me, if I was advising him, I'd say, hey man, it's probably best that you're healthy, right? Go time real fast. And, some team's going to say this kid caught, 60 balls of his career at Notre Dame, 60, 70 balls of his career at Notre Dame. And, had some big plays and he's healthy, going to run real fast. And, let's take a shot on this kid. I think that's, to me, the best option for him because, again, he's got 70 career catches for 887 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's got 276 career rushing yards, 2 more touchdowns. So, for his career, Ryan, he's got 93 touches for 1,163 yards and 10 touchdowns. It's not like he doesn't have film and production to show people. He's going to have film over the years to show people and say, hey, look, it is what it is. But look how fast I ran. Somebody's going to take a shot on that kid, either late in the draft or most likely, I would say, as a priority free agent.
Yeah. I mean, but he does have a couple things working for him, right? I mean, that speed, make fun of it, folks. But if a scout has a 4.38 on his clock, it's going to be hard to kind of ignore that at the pro day, right? Like those things are going to be hard for some guys. So Braden Lindsey will definitely get a look. There's no doubts. Pedigree, Notre Dame, run fast. He's going to get a look in a camp. There's no doubt about it. From there, it'll be about how consistent can you be, and can you contribute on special teams at all? If you can, then we'll see what happens. Maybe it's a practice squatter. Like it's possible, right? So I think that he has some things working for him. It's very unfortunate with how everything's kind of transpired during his career because I still think there was more that you could have gotten out of his talent, unfortunately. And some things are in his control, some things were not in his control, which is the unfortunate part. But I do think that he is a guy that will intrigue some NFL teams, and he will definitely be in a camp next year. There's no doubt about it.
And just so people understand, me wanting him to go is not that I wouldn't want him back. It's just that I just don't think Notre Dame is going to put him in the role that would make it worth for him to come back if I was advising him. That's where it comes from. If it was up to me, I would have used him more this year, and we were not having this conversation. You know my stance on him as a player, Ryan. And, you and I saw enough film this year, and you watched him in person twice to be like, if this kid got thrown the ball half the time that he was just like really open, he'd have close to 1,000 yards this year. It's insane how it is really nuts. So I think I'm going to do that on the board one of these days. I'm going to go through it and the all 22 one night when I can't sleep, because I can never sleep, and just screenshot every time he's like 5 yards past a guy and just be like, not here, and just put it on the board, like the 50 clips of him just like smoking a dude and the ball not coming his way. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that.
Or if it does come his way, it's like 3 seconds too late, and he still comes back and makes a great catch, right?
Right, like the Navy game, right?
Yes,
right,
yes.
exactly. And 6-year thing to me would not be an option if I was advising Braden either. Just because, again, are you going to really go somewhere they're going to make you a 60 catch, 1,000-yard guy, and can you guarantee me you're going to be healthy? You kind of are what you are, at this point in time. Take your chance, run real fast, try to get an invite, and then go do your thing there. And then somebody made a great point, and if you know Braden, you understand this. Each rolls under it. He's going to make 200,000 plus a year the rest of his life, even if the NFL doesn't work out, because of how he took advantage of his degrees at Notre Dame. And that's spot on.
Yep.
That's spot on. And that's one of the reasons you come to Notre Dame. Football doesn't work out.
Absolutely.
Braden Lindsey's going to be very successful in life, whether football works out or not. So those are the decisions for me, Ryan. I don't think there's a lot of other decisions. I mean, do you think any of the linebackers have NFL, like legit NFL decisions to make? I don't think that they do.
I don't. I mean, so NFS had, I think, J.D. Bertrand with like a 7th round grade in the preseason. Yeah. I don't think that that's held up, obviously, with the kind of inconsistencies. So I really don't. I mean, yeah, I think it would be in their best interest if they are taken back, that they should go back, in my opinion.
And if they don't, it's kind of where I'm leaning towards. Then I'd say find a place where you can go be a starter for another year.
Yes.
And play. That would be the thing for me. So
no doubt.
That's kind of my stance on that. So that's sort of the stay or go. A little bit different group. I mean, because obviously Jarrett Patterson technically has another year that he could play, but there'd be no reason for him to take it.
And he already accepted a Senior Bowl.
So. Right? Josh Lugg can't come back. I mean, Zeke Correll doesn't really have a decision. I mean, Zeke Correll's not an NFL kid just, yet. And so, I mean, there's really nobody else.
Joe Alt can petition to leave as a second-year player if he wants, I guess. But
I guess, I mean, yeah, I mean,
it's a joke.
Mike Williams found out that's not a great idea.
Yes.
Who was the other guy? It was Mike Williams and Maurice Clarett, right? Were the two guys that year. Did they do it the same year?
Maurice Clarett tried to leave after his freshman year.
Right, but didn't they do it the same year, though? Wasn't Mike Williams and Maurice Clarett the same year? Let me look that up. I thought they tried to do it the same year. Mike Williams, USC stats. Let me just find it here real quick. Because he was later. He was after Clarett.
I remember Mike Williams had a little reclamation project in the NFL for a year with the Seahawks. I remember that. But yeah, he was so good in college.
And he did it the year after Maurice Clarett. Maurice Clarett tried it after 2002, correct?
Yes.
Yep. And then Mike Williams tried it after 2003, and they both lost. So, Mike Williams is really good his first 2 years at USC. Good.
Yes,
he got 30 touchdowns in his first 2 years at USC.
So Maurice Clarett tried it after his freshman year, got denied, obviously. He ends up when he ends up actually coming out, he was a 3rd round draft.
Dude, I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm still bitter about that.
He didn't make out of camp as a 3rd round pick. It's wild, man.
Ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous. Don't get me started. That was back when Mike Shanahan thought that he could take any running back behind his line and turn him into a player. Because remember they signed Ron Dane. Like they just kept thinking hey, we turned Mike Anderson and Olandis Gary into 1,000.
Olandis Gary.
You know what I mean? We turn anybody into 1,000-yard rusher. I'm like, no, not really. Not really. But anyway. So yeah, not a lot of NFL decisions to be made other than the 2 kids that already decided and Justin Adamiole. I think those to me are the biggest NFL decisions to make on the current Notre Dame roster. All right, Ryan, let's go to the mailbag now. So we've had several questions now. We just had another super chat pop up here real quick, and we'll pull that one up first because it's kind of related to what we just discussed, Ryan, about NFL draft. But Nathan Lopes, I'm going to say it's Lopes because it's spelled like Davey Lopes from back in the day. If it's Lopez, I apologize, Nathan, but I'm going to say Nathan Lopes. Let me know if I got that wrong. Will Michael Mayer get a 1st round grade from you, Mr. Ryan?
He will. He will. He already does. I already did my preliminary grade on him, so I just need to finalize it and type it up and all that good stuff. But yes, he will have a first round grade. He is one of the top tight ends I've ever graded. He might be number one. I need to look that up actually. But yes, he is a first round tight end. There's no doubt about it.
Do you think there's any chance, barring injury, that he falls out of the first round?
I would be shocked if Michael Mayer falls out of the first round. Like actually chin on floor shocked. I can't see that happening, man. He's got the pedigree, he's got the production, he's got the body, like everything about him screams first round. I would just be very, very surprised if he doesn't go in the first.
Yep, I agree. Let's go. We had another super chat up here from Brian Chesanik. Thank you, Brian, very, very much. He goes, my favorite freshman to watch next year besides the Bowens are Christian Gray, Brandon Hillman at wide receiver, Great House, love at running back, hard to pick four. Also living in North Carolina my whole life, the respect for Indy has pulled a 180 the last 5 years. Thank you. Well, that's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Mainly because they've smacked the teams from that region in the last 5 years. The last time they lost to a team from North Carolina, I believe, was 2016, right? They lost to NC State in the Hurricane game because they beat Carolina and Carolina and NC State in 17. Mm-hmm. They didn't play either one of them in 18. They didn't play either one of them in 19. They did beat Duke in 19, and they beat Duke in 20, and they beat North Carolina in 20. And then they beat North Carolina last year, and then they beat North Carolina again this year. So, yeah, I would have. And then they beat Wake Forest in 18, 17, and 18. So, yeah, the state of North Carolina has not had a lot of success against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the state of South Carolina is 1-2 against Notre Dame the last 3 times they've played, by the way. We should mention.
Brian, you think with the Dylan Edwards decommitment that Brandon Hillman gets more of an offensive look early now than you would suppose? I still
think they're just kind of in a let's see how everything shakes out. Let's see, let's see who all signs on the dotted line, right?
Sure.
Let's see who, because there's a scenario in which maybe he gets a shot at running back if some guys don't sign. Again, we're just hypotheticals out there. I mean, who knows with signing day? We believe right now everyone's saying the right things. We'll see what happens. But there's a lot of things. Maybe it's Rover. Maybe depending on how the roster shakes out, like let's just say hypothetically, Jack Kaiser decides, you know what, I don't want to split reps next year. I'm going to go transfer to Purdue. 100% hypothetical, people. I'm going to go transfer to Purdue or Indiana and play my last year or somewhere where I can be an inside backer or something like that. I don't know.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden, like, hey, you may want to have a conversation where maybe Brandon's playing sooner there. Receiver run. I mean, I just say let everything shake out. Let the portal shake out. Let signing day shake out. I don't believe he's an early enrollee.
I don't think so.
So you'll have time. You don't have to figure it out. See how spring ball goes, and that's the pitch for him. Is like, hey man, we're just recruiting you as an athlete. We'll figure out where we can get you on the field the fastest. I think there's just see how spring ball goes, see how the portal goes, see how the draft decisions go, and then figure out where you can get him on the field the fastest. And that's exactly why you recruit a kid like that. Is for that exact reason. But, other freshmen to watch, Brian, we'll talk a lot more about this on signing day, but I mean, I think you nailed a lot of them. I think Jalen Greathouse Braylon James is a guy that maybe could find a niche role as a vertical guy. Running back's going to be tough just because they're so thick there, deep there. The depth is so good there, and you'll get Jadarian Price next year. But man, Jeremiah Love's going to be really hard to keep off the field next year, Ryan, which we'll get into. I think at least one of the freshman D linemen works into the rotation somehow, whether it's Devin Houston inside, whether it's Boubacar or Brendan Vernon as a big end or a 3 technique. I think one of those guys will play next year. Micah Bell to me is a guy that could maybe have a chance just because of his speed, and he's kind of a strong kid for a skinny guy. Maybe he competes for the nickel slot next year a little bit, at Notre Dame. And then another guy that Peyton Bowen obviously I think could be a starter, but another guy that could have a chance to get some time next year is Don Schuler as a part of the safety rotation. He's another guy to look at.
Absolutely.
All right, good follow up there. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's all good. So anyway, Moving
You took
on.
every player. What do you want me to
Okay.
say? All
Okay.
of them are good.
Colonel Clink's monocle took a half day. Glad I can finally make a weekday live show. Does South Carolina have anyone opting out?
Yeah, I mean, as of now, they have for sure Cam Smith is opting out, their cornerback. He declared for the draft, so he is not going to play. And then they have a couple kids have already hit the portal. The notable ones are Jaheim Bell. Their tight ends entered the portal, as did
Tight
their other
end
tight end,
slash
Austin
backup running back.
Stogner. Yes, which is the craziest thing I've ever seen. But yes. And then Austin Stogner is already transferring back to Oklahoma.
That's one of
which
the
is
weirdest portal things I've seen.
It happened quick,
Like,
man. Happened.
weird.
I got a tip on that one maybe like a week before he entered the portal that he was going back to Oklahoma. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, as of now, the only
Yeah.
guys I know of for sure that are legitimate producers are Cam Smith, who probably going to go relatively early in the draft at corner, and then Jaheim Bell and Austin Stogner. So they do not have much depth at tight end right now with South Carolina.
Yeah. That's not ideal situation. Irish blooded with Edwards' decommitment and his spot open. Is there another position that spot might go to that has more need than receiver, than running back and wide receiver? So Ryan, you want you update kind of what we put on the board this morning, and if you were on the message board, I think Irish blooded is. Ryan's we had an update this morning on Khalil Barnes that kind of makes it seem like I think Notre Dame is good where they are right now.
Yeah.
So definitely check that on the board. They were going to go visit him today. That was the whole thing. And then they decided not to because I think they're comfortable with where they are. Say, look, sign the guys we have. That's an elite class. And I mean, that's why Brandon Hillman is such an important thing, Ryan, because you lose a Dylan Edwards. If you need that fifth, seventh guy at the two skill positions, he could be there. You know, otherwise you can rover, safety, receiver, running back, wherever there's the need, you can figure out where to play him. As we talked about before. But I think right now, Ryan, that the plan is to stand pat. There's some other guys they offered Mason Robinson today, defensive end from Maryland. He's probably going to Penn State. You know, obviously if certain guys called him and wanted to commit last second, they'd take them. I think their thing is we're not going to fill a spot just to fill a spot. If there's a guy out there that we really think can help our football team, we'll bring him in. And I think with Khalil Barnes, it's more of he really wanted to play receiver. And I just don't think at the end of the day, once they got Caleb Smith, they really felt the need to put him there because that's not his best position, in my opinion. That's what he thinks his best position is, but I don't think it's his best position. And I don't think the staff ultimately believe it's his best position. So instead of telling the kid what he wants to hear to get him in the class, knowing you don't really think he can play there, they just decided to move on, which I respect that, to be completely honest with you.
And I mean, I talked about that on the show yesterday, Brian. Kudos to Notre Dame in one sense, right? Like it stinks to lose a guy like Dylan Edwards, but you did create incredible depth at a couple different positions that he could have potentially played, right? So you have 4 fantastic wide receivers in the class. You have 2 really great running backs in the class as well, as of now, right? You have to see what happens at signing day. But you have 6 players in those 2 positions right now where losing a Dylan Edwards, it hurts, but it's not earth shattering, right? It's not like you are like, oh man, what are we going to do now? Like it's not one of those situations. So it stinks, but they're able to bounce back, I think, quickly with it. And like you said, I don't think they're going to force a player that they don't love, right? Like I think they liked Khalil Barnes as an athlete. There's no doubt, but just
more as a DB.
wide receiver, that's not his best fit.
They liked him more as a DB, and he just was set on getting a shot at receiver, which. You know, I don't even know if Clemson's necessarily recruiting him as a receiver. Are they? Like that's why Notre Dame was his leader because they were willing to give him that shot. But once they got Caleb Smith, there was not the need there.
I think that Notre Dame and Oklahoma are similar with their idea of Khalil Barnes, which is why I didn't think that they were going to end up with either spot. Where I think that Oklahoma also thinks that he's a defensive back at the next level. So. I'm not really sure what Clemson thinks of him. I just know that Clemson wants him. So
I think Clemson. I could be wrong, but I think Clemson kind of looks at him like Notre Dame looks at Brandon Hillman. Just hey, let's just get him, and we'll figure the rest out later. So I want to bring this super chat up because this is big. Mike Sullivan, one of the members of our message board, put a prayer request out on the board this morning. Sort of an emergency situation with his daughter that was very scary. She had to be rushed to the hospital. Mike fills us in, says, thanks everyone for the thoughts and prayers. It was just a large abscess. Surgery went well. She's going to be super sore for a few days, but we can handle that. I read the post multiple times during my surgery. Thanks. You are very, very welcome. And if I remember correctly, Ryan, she's young, right? Mike's daughter's young?
I believe so.
So, yeah, I believe I'm pulling the post up here now, but I believe she's 8 years old. Oof. And so very scary, Mike. And so we are glad that it's worked out, and we're happy for you, man. And you always got your IB family to pray for you and be there for you, man. So we're glad to hear that. And we thank you very much, Mike, not just for your super chat, but more importantly for letting us know. I'm not a parent, like Ryan's a parent. He's a girl dad, about to be a two-time girl dad here for too long. A lot of other girl dads, a lot of other dads period in the board. So I just remember how it was for us with Rita, who's a dog. I couldn't imagine having to rush my flesh and blood to the hospital. So, man, I'm glad things are going well, Mike. Very, very glad to hear that she's going to be okay. Johnny from the boot asks Ryan, maybe quick answer, since Edwards decommitted based on NIL and the abundance of talent committed, do you think the commitment of Hillman was the final straw?
Look, I think that, I mean, Brian, did it have some impacts? I would say probably, right? I mean, I think that you're looking, when Dylan's originally looking at the class, he's like, okay, how am I going to fit into this conversation? You have a couple of really talented running backs. You have 4 wide receivers. And I think that when you get a guy like a Brandon Hillman that can potentially play 2 of the positions that you play, right? Like it is a little unsettling as far as where's my playing time ultimately going to come from. So I'm sure it was part of the equation, Johnny. I ultimately, though, at this point, I think that this one is more a lot of things kind of piling up and then other opportunities being out there. Like, I think that's
he wants to be the guy. Yeah. And he was not going to be the guy at Notre Dame. That's okay. Whatever.
Which is fine. Yeah.
Sure.
We'll see how it works out.
I'm not going to take any shots at the kid. He made the decision who's best for him. I just don't like the way. Again, a lot of times in life, I don't have a problem with your decision. I don't like the way you made it, is the thing that I would say I didn't agree with. And, but to each their own. To each their own. D. Beasy, super chat, thank you. Thank you, D. Get into it, coach. This is in reference to the Michael Mayer John Mackey Award. I spent most of my career doing this, pushing back on the narrative with Notre Dame fans that, like, dude, not everything is a conspiracy against Notre Dame. But it's like, honestly, Ryan, I just can't anymore.
Yeah.
Like with a lot of stuff, like it started with Quentin Nelson not winning the Outland.
Still wild.
Like the fact that the best
won it
guard,
that year?
Ed Oliver, good player in the AAC.
Player, yeah.
Right. But like, the most dominant interior offensive lineman I've ever seen. The second most dominant offensive lineman I've ever seen behind Orlando Pace in college. Doesn't win any of those awards. Didn't win not a single postseason award other than All-American. It's like Tyler Eifert Tyler Eifert should have won 2 Mackeys. The only reason he won the second one is because Notre Dame went undefeated. He won the Mackey the year he was way less productive. Like just some of the stuff you look at, like Will Fuller, I don't even believe was a finalist for the Biletnikoff in 15. Some of the stuff, it's like how you put Brock Bowers, how he gets the award over and all these clown Georgia fans, and some of these. I've met a lot of good Georgia fans over the years, most in person, but on Twitter, they're just stupid, some of these people. But their thing is, well, look at his rushing yards. Really? His rushing yards? The ball got spread around more, Georgia. Yeah, which is not it's like you're not making the argument you think you're making. Like the fact that everyone in the stadium knew that he was the primary target of Notre Dame and focused their entire defense. Like one guy today was like, well, Bowers forced defenses to blah. And I'm like, dude, I was like, tell me you've never watched Michael Mayer without telling me you've never watched Michael Mayer, right? Like, it's just a clown show. It's like, I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, I give up. I can't. I watched Rivals release their rankings recently, right? And who are the two kids that went up the most in the rankings? Jay Lamar and Peyton Bowen, the two guys who were considered the most likely to flip. You know what I mean? Then Dylan Edwards, who you know what I mean? And then they put Kenny Minchie in. He's in now, and Apsher's in now. Yeah, but then they dropped Don Schuler down to a 3-star. They dropped out Cooper Flanagan from it. They dropped out Sam Pendleton from it. And it's just like –
I just can't imagine anybody that could watch a Don Schuler and be like, you know what, that's a 3-star player.
Yeah,
like,
we're going to ignore the fact that Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State tried to flip him during his senior season. But, yeah, he's a 3-star. Like, some of this stuff is just I can't watch. And some people say, well, they didn't drop. Other people moved up. But it only tends to happen to kind of like one of the major powers. That's the only one it tends to happen to. You know, where like the only guys that rise up in the rankings for Notre Dame are the guys that are considered flip candidates.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, notice Jeremiah Love's vault up the rankings stopped once he committed to Notre Dame.
Even though dominant. His best film was at the end of the season.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Like he just like got to the playoffs and was like, okay, it's time for me to actually show y'all what I can do now. It just
Brian, I can't against a dominant team in the Champions League Summit North who has dudes everywhere, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to go for 5 tutties today in the state championship game. Like, it doesn't make sense, man. Can I say this though? It doesn't even stop with Michael Mayer with the award stuff though. It doesn't. I mentioned this already. They had Tre'Davious Hodges-Tomlinson from TCU as the Jim Thorpe winner over Clark Phillips. What are we doing, man? What are we doing? It wasn't even close. And people were all getting upset about the Marvin Harrison Jr. thing. I was okay with that one. Jalen Hyatt had a fantastic year. So I was okay with that one. But some of these, man, were just awful. Just so disrespectful.
Well, and Jalen Hyatt had to do that too without his sort of partner in crime for half the year. You know, I mean, whereas with all due respect to Marvin Harrison, was phenomenal. I mean, it helps when you've got Emeka Egbuka taking some of the pressure off of you. You know, and you're doing it against a Big Ten conference that kind of lacks a lot of talent. And the other thing too is, I mean, Jalen Hyatt had more yards, more touchdowns, and he did it in 5 fewer catches. Emeka had 66 catches for 1,039 yards and 9 touchdowns. You know, like the next best leading receiver at Tennessee was 48 for 619. It was Brew McCoy. You know, and so look, Marvin Harrison was really good. And I would have had no issue if Marvin would have won it. None. I would not be advocating for, it should have been Jalen Hyatt. I just said they're both deserving, right? But like, with all due respect, there was a clear gap, in my opinion, in the ability of, or the production, the talent, the impact of a Michael Mayer, especially when the number one thing they talk about is blocking. I mean, it's not even close.
And all due respect to Brock Bowers, but you're not putting him in the block. That's not what he's asked to do.
No.
Yeah.
No, he's not. And so that's kind of thing for me is just some of these are just like it's gone back to sort of like it's the best guy on the best teams or whatever in a lot of instances, not just the best player. Like, I don't care if your team was 3-9. If you're the best receiver in the country, you're the best receiver in the country. If you're the best D lineman in the country, you're the best D lineman in the country. But, you know, where was the award show aired on last night? What network?
ESPN.
Okay. There you go.
I thought you were just doing a didn't know if you needed an answer on that one.
Oh, I wanted an answer. It was a rhetorical question, but I wanted an answer. Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
you know, it's hard to take him seriously anymore. It really
wild,
is.
Though. It was really wild. Because like every other one, I'm just like, okay, they Bijan, the Doak Walker. I'm like, cool, that's fine. Like you could argue it was maybe Blake Corum, like whatever, that's fine. Marvin Harrison, Jalen Hyatt. I would have been fine either way, but I'm just like Michael Mayer didn't get he didn't.
And
get
then the Football Writers Association of America had Brock Bowers as the number one, the first team tight end this year.
I saw that. I told you that was going to happen.
That's why it's just a joke. It really is. And it's sad because it impacts people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you put on all this work, you've earned something. Yeah. Not that you deserve it, you've earned it. He didn't deserve the Mackey. He earned the Mackey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Clark Phillips didn't deserve, he earned it. And he did so on a defense that really didn't give him a lot of help a lot of times.
No.
You know, and so it's frustrating. It's like Drake Bowen's ranking. Like, Rivals has a guy that puts out this, should Drake Bowen be a 5-star or not, before they're in Vail, and then they drop him. You knew you were going to drop him. Like, What?
It's all about clickbait. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like I can't take y'all seriously anymore because it's so obvious that you guys are just either doing things for clicks or talking out of your butts or just biased or just bad at your job or some combination of those things. And it's not just, I mean, it's not just Notre Dame kids, but it seems to affect Notre Dame kids. Because I would point out, like, well, this kid dropped and this school did this, but it's getting to the point now where it's like every time Georgia gets a commitment, the next time that kid's ranked, he skyrockets up the rankings. Same thing for Alabama, skyrockets. And I'd say Ohio State deals with a little bit of that too in the last couple of years. I feel like they've kind of, some kids that have committed Ohio State, they then knock back a little bit and they take some of the shine off of it. You know, where they'll boost a kid that goes to, Alabama, Georgia, some others. And it's just like, okay, you guys are now playing to the fan bases, not actually.
Brian, we never talked about this one, but how about Stetson Bennett being a Heisman finalist?
I love the thing where Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy in 2016. Stetson Bennett is a finalist in 2022. They're the same age right now.
It's wild, man. And Lamar's about to get his second contract in the NFL.
Thank you.
I saw that too, man. It was so
like, come on, man.
I retweeted. I was just like, I love college football.
Lord have mercy. Well, and then Stetson outplayed Hendon Hooker. I hate that. I hate that analysis because one guy played on a significantly better team than the other one that day. So it's like, okay, whatever.
Yep. Hendon deserved to be on there, man. He just deserved it. He did.
Somebody just said this. At least they gave that Dylan Gibbons Warfel Award correct. If that would have been the biggest travesty of all of them.
Yeah.
If Dylan Gibbons didn't get that award, that'd have been the biggest travesty of all of them. Because what that kid has done with his fame and his name, image, and likeness, you talk about a kid that truly understands what name, image, and likeness is all about, and how you can use it to not just better yourself, but to better the world around you. That kid gets it. So props to him. Absolutely.
No doubt.
So it's to the point now where I'm not even like, it's hard to even get mad. It's just embarrassing and it's sad because it's an industry that we're a part of that I always thought did a great service. That's just become like, we were talking to Buddy last night. You're like, I don't know why I'm surprised that ESPN is what it is. Their name is Entertainment. And what is it? Entertainment, Sports, and Production Network.
Yeah.
It was always designed to just be a network that carried games. They tried to then dabble into sports, but at the root of it is they're about producing games and drawing as many eyes to their games. And so every other arm of what they do is geared towards creating talk about the games they're going to do. And that's just the reality of it. Sad reality of it. It's just, you can't take them seriously anymore. News in our country, sports and political, has just become a soap opera. It's not even real anymore. It's just a soap opera now. And it's sad, but it's why we do what we do. So anyway, I am very curious to see if this happens someday. I am very curious to see if some kid someday, some lawyer someday, I promise you this is going to happen, is going to sue one of these recruiting services for dropping a kid's rankings for no reason, because they're going to say his ranking impacts his name, image, and likeness value.
Oh, yeah.
And your decision to drop him for whatever reason, you know what I mean? Now, he may not have a leg to stand on legally, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to sue and then still just try to get a settlement out of it. Watch. I'm telling you it's going to happen.
Well, Brian, what even, I mean, think about it like the, the On3 thing that shows the NIL, like whatever it is, like their worth type of thing. I mean, how did they not get in trouble for that? If I was a player that was trying to negotiate a deal or something, and then the company uses that as a baseline, I'd be like, no, they don't determine that. I determine that, right? Like that's not how that works. But
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be interesting when that day comes, because I do believe that day is going to come. This is the strangest, oddest question we've ever gotten, Ryan. Irish to the moon. Given the opportunity, would you go to the moon? So,
yes, because my weight's getting a little heavy, so I would like to be a little lighter, and you're lighter on the moon. So there you go.
I'm going to say no. I don't like flying. I don't like heights. I think leaving this atmosphere might be something I would not be too thrilled about.
You wouldn't even feel it, man. It'd be like being on a roller coaster and then you're just floating. It'd be great.
I grew up. I was, I think, 8 years old, and I think 8 years old. I think it was 86. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was a kid. I was young, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And there, growing up in Lima, there's the Neil Armstrong was from like right down the street where I'm from Walpock, a team that I grew up playing in. His museum, at least, was in Wapakoneta. And so we would always go there for, just, I loved going there. And I, doing the thing where, they put the stars up on that, the dome up in the top and all, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And I had, they had this space shuttle, the Challenger, was going to launch, and they were going to take a teacher up there, and we were going to sit there and like let her teach a lesson and all this kind of, it's going to be really cool. And I had the picture of those astronauts on my desk, and I thought I just want to be an astronaut. And then I watched it explode, and it really shook me. I mean, it just to the point where I was like, that's just not something that you just kind of, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know if that's really something I'd want to do. So anytime you ever think about the idea of like, because, now Elon Musk is taking people to space and all this other kind of stuff. And it's just like, no, I'm good. I'm good right here.
It's like I forget what the number was, but I think it's like $1 million for like 6 minutes or something like that. Because he takes you into space, Brian, but like he takes you in and then back out real quick.
Right.
It's not like an actual experience.
Right. It's like a giant, the world's biggest non-attached roller coaster.
It really is.
You know what I mean?
Is, man. It really is, though. That's good. Yeah. I mean, it's a good quantifier. Like that's exactly what it is.
You go up and you go down, and it costs a lot of money. So
at least Elon Musk owns Twitter now, so we're all in good hands.
There you go. It's better now than it was. All right, Brian Hockney, mailbag comp I see for Ben Minich as a similar athlete as Harrison Smith. Do you have a comp for him? Well, I don't see that, Brian. I think Harrison was a more powerful athlete than Ben was.
6'2".
Yeah, much bigger body type. Athletically, I think Ben is more smooth. Harrison was more twitchy and explosive. Do you have a better comp for him? As I'm kind of thinking through the different safeties that Notre Dame has had. I mean, I think he's. Part of me wants to be like Jalen Elliott is one that really comes to mind. That's a similar body type, similar athleticism at the high school level. Jalen was a quarterback in a corner his senior year. I'm trying to think of some Notre Dame guys that he would remind me a lot of. Honestly,
I really don't have a good one for him. I don't have a good one.
Yeah. I mean, sure. Yeah, I just think he's a really smooth athlete. I just trying to think of some
smooth, good straight line.
He's really fluid, and a lot of the safeties they've had haven't been that way.
Sure.
He probably reminds me the most of athletically is probably Alohi Gilman. More quick than fast, real fluid. He's taller than Alohi was, but Alohi wasn't real fast. Alohi was really moved quickly. Easy change of direction, could get downhill quickly, really, really instinctive, really high football IQ. And I think that's who Ben reminds me the most of is probably Alohi Gilman. And it's quite a comp. Yeah, because Alohi was a really good football player. Really good football player.
He's a really good player.
Yep. Mark Avalone says, do you see the transfer portal NIL pushing more coaches to the NFL or out of coaching than before? Absolutely. If they don't get this, if they don't get this under wraps, it's like you're going to love coaching at about 10 schools. And outside of that, it's going to suck.
Can you imagine being a mid-tier school right now where you're just like, man, I have no chance, like a mid-tier SEC school or a mid-tier Big Ten school,
like Clark Lee and Vanderbilt. The coach before them, they spend the last 2 years developing this Mike Wright kid at quarterback, and then bam, he jumps in the portal.
Yep.
Like, okay, what are you supposed to do there? Like,
their leading rusher Raymond Davis just entered the portal too, and he ran for 1,000 yards for the team this year. It's just like, wow, man. Like
you're trying to build this team up. You go from 1-11, 2-10 to 5-7. You're one win away from making a bowl game, and then bam, your best players leave because they can get more money somewhere else. Like that's really what this is supposed to be about. Like really, that's the lesson we're teaching.
They were very improved this year too. That's a good example is Vanderbilt because I mean they took big strides this year. They were a lot better.
They're probably going to go back down.
Yeah, probably
going to go back down.
That's a good point.
So yeah. It's frustrating. We have another super chat down here from Thangak. Thank you for the super chat very much. Today is my 1-year anniversary with IB. Looking forward to another great year of message board intel and unrivaled analysis. I appreciate that very much. And we're glad to have you on board. Ryan and I were talking last night. We're actually on a further along we're on a better pace page views wise on the website than we were last year, this first week and a half of the December, which is wild when you consider what was happening last December in the first week, with Kelly having left just before December, all the articles we wrote about that. Then Freeman gets hired. Our site has taken off really since then, and it's been a great ride. And of course, that's when our website really launched, and it's been fun to see it grow. It really has. It really has. And people like you that jumped on board a year ago, there's a lot of people on this channel that are like, yeah, I found you guys when Kelly left. I have heard that story so many times, and we're glad. We're glad that we were able to be your landing spot when all that happened. So thank you for that very much. David Lowe, Brian, did y'all have any idea Edwards was decommitting? It was a complete surprise for the expert. We did not know he was going to decommit. We were under the impression he had said he was going to stick. What we knew of is that there had been a lot of NIL conversation with him and his family. Mm-hmm. And we had been told, there was some, I almost don't want, should I say it, Ryan? Because what we talked about last night, I'll just say this. So I don't want this to come across as sour grapes.
Sure.
There are some warning signs that we were told about when he flipped to Notre Dame in the first place.
Yeah.
That came from how he handled certain things at K-State and sort of how he conducted himself as a senior and some things that probably we should have paid a little bit more attention to.
But we thought that was sour grapes.
Right, exactly.
Right, exactly.
And what was being told to the staff was a little different. There was enough smoke that they weren't completely caught off guard, but they told Notre Dame in person, I was told when they had the in-home the other night, that everything was good. And then 24 hours later, he's flipped and not even going to consider. Like, he not only wasn't going to, he said he wasn't going to consider them anymore. Part of that was when he decommitted, Notre Dame was just kind of like, whatever. Like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, why would you want to fight to keep that kid in the class at this point in time?
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks before signing day, really?
Seriously,
come on, man. Actually, yeah. No, we did not. It caught us by surprise that he did decommit based on what he had been saying, but it wasn't one where we're like, what?
Yeah.
Wow.
It also took some recruits off guard too, some commits, which is just very,
because he was telling people one thing and then did another, right?
Exactly.
But I think the way you put it is off guard is a better way of putting it. Because again, I wouldn't say that I was surprised that he did it, but I wasn't expecting it. Surprise being more of a gut thing. There was no intel that he was going to decommit that we got, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So I'm not trying to make it seem like, oh no, we really knew he was going to do. No, we didn't. We didn't know he was going to do this.
No, there was some smoke, but we didn't know it was going to happen. So
yeah, I wasn't surprised that it would have happened. Like, if you told me like tomorrow, like, I don't even want to say it because then people go, oh, Driscoll said, but like, there's kids in this class, if they decommit, I was like, no way. Don't believe you.
I
think somebody hacked his account. Somebody hacked his account. There's no way. There's no way Sam Pendleton's going to NC State. You know what I mean? Like, somebody hacked his account. Somebody's pranking him. It's not real. It's not happening.
Mm-hmm. It's like remember when the Braylon James TCU stuff happened a few weeks ago? Like, that's what it would be like. Okay.
The responses we got when we were digging into that was freaking hilarious.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Yep. Hilarious. Jeff Fluke says, can you guys do a recruiting class breakdown of the top 10 classes, of course, after signing day? We are going to do that, Jeff, but it's going to be on the CFB Nation channel. So we'll do it on that one, not on Irish Breakdown. Facilitated and form-wise, is Foskey going to the Reese's Senior Bowl after just opting out of Notre Dame's bowl game? What does he have left to prove? Well, he has a lot left to prove, just not necessarily anything to prove in a Notre Dame uniform, Ryan. Yeah. It's a different type of event.
I mean, Brian, like, I was completely transparent with my opinion that I thought Isaiah Foskey could rise to being a top 10 to 15 pick if he took massive steps forward, right? Like, I think he's that talented. He didn't take those steps, if we're being honest with ourselves, right? Was he still a really good player? For sure, no doubt. But the nuance of the game is still a question mark with him. So you want to go to the recent Senior Bowl to show that you're working on your game, because the thing that they're going to be watching most in Mobile, Alabama is the one-on-ones against offensive linemen. And if he shows a little pass rush repertoire, a little hand usage, a little counter moves, like if he does all that stuff, he has a lot to gain right now. Because I would say this, and I know some people pushed back on me on the show last night, Brian, when I said this. I think it's much more likely that he goes day 2 than he is a first-round pick right this second. Right. But if he goes to Mobile and has a great day and then he tests well, then maybe we're talking about being in the first-round conversation again. So he has a lot to gain, in my opinion.
The Senior Bowl can move. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, Zach Martin got drafted where he did because of the Senior Bowl.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying he would have been a third-round pick, but like he went 16 because he dominated the entire week at the Senior Bowl.
Eric Fisher, a few years ago out of Central Michigan, went first overall. He was a second-round pick going into that event.
Yeah.
Last year, Cole Strange, the offensive guard out of Chattanooga, was probably a third-round pick. He comes out and he gets drafted in the first round by the New England Patriots because he dominated the Senior Bowl. Right. Happens.
And then that kid from the D3 kid a couple years ago.
Oh, Quinn Miners.
The Broncos drafted. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot you can prove there. That beating a South Carolina offensive line that's okay, but not a bunch of guys you're about to draft. It's a chance for me to watch people that are on my board that are going against each other and see them up close and personal, interview them, and all those type of things. And I think that's all part of it. And then you get to see a kid up close and personal, up close in person. That's part of it as well.
Talk to him, body type him, all that good stuff.
Yep. Berkshire Yank, realistically, how long does it take for a quarterback to learn the offense? I get it's not ideal to start a true freshman, but what if he enrolls early and goes through spring practice? Honestly, that depends on the kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, some kids can come pick it up right away. Others, it takes them a year. Others, it takes 2 years. Some never figure it out. It just depends on the kid and how much opportunity you can get him. I think here we're referring to Kenny Minchie. I think that, and the other thing too is what's your experience level? For example, if they bring in a transfer kid that's 3-year starter, he's going to pick up the Notre Dame offense a whole lot faster than a kid who's coming from a high school because he's already speaking that language, so to speak. Now it's just got to get tailored to what Notre Dame's specific terminology is. He's not having to expand his mind per se, where a high school kid's going to have to expand his mind and learn the technique's got to come and everything's new to him, where a transfer kid's like, yeah, I know how to do all this. I'm good, man. Especially if it's a grad transfer kid, because then he's not really taking the classes that that he's not getting used to college. He doesn't have to take as many classes. All of that stuff is different. Mm-hmm. And so, but it honestly depends on the kid. And that's a bit of a cop out, but I mean, usually it really does. And even if a freshman shows enough aptitude to play as a freshman, you're still not giving him the full scope of your offense. I mean, you go look at what Clemson did in 2018. They did not have a really deep playbook for Trevor Lawrence the way they did in 2016 for Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
There just was less on his shoulders. They took a lot of the running stuff out, even though Trevor can run, which he showed 2 years, the next 2 years, they didn't have him do a lot of that as a true freshman. When he ran, it was a scramble, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's part of it too, is, you're really not going to pick up the whole thing. A freshman at Notre Dame, for example, would just have to be so much more physically better than everybody else that they kind of have to say, hey, it's worth it to lower, limit what we're doing volume wise, because this kid's just too good of a player. For sure. So, or there's an injury that forces that.
Yep.
Matt McCarthy says, Ryan, what's the boundary lines for New Jersey for being fans of the teams in different sports? Baseball, Mets, Yankees, Phillies, football, Jets, Giants, is that who that is? I would imagine. And then the Eagles, and then basketball, the Knicks, the Nets, and the Sixers, and then hockey, the Devils, the Rangers. You got the Flyers and the Islanders. Are the Islanders still a team? I didn't even know that.
Islanders are still a team. Yep.
Okay.
The Islanders.
Shows you how much I follow hockey. So Ryan, what say you on that, Mr. New Jersey?
I don't think there's an exact line, Matt. I would say this. I think I would consider anything Trenton and above to be North Jersey, in my opinion. There's no Central Jersey. Can we start with that? There's no Central Jersey. It's North or you're South. That's just it. All right. So I would say Trenton and down would be South, and then parts of Trenton and up would be the North Jersey side of everything, right? It's just more about who you identify with. Like I identify more with Philly than I do with New York. Like I live in a more secluded area. There's a lot more farmlands in the South Jersey area than there are up north. The north is more industrialized than where I live in the southern part of New Jersey. So I'd say Trenton and down is New Jersey, and yeah, they associate obviously with cheesesteaks and pork roll, and not Taylor ham and whatever the heck else they do in North Jersey. So
there you go.
Brian? What do you call it? Is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
I don't know what either one of those things are.
Oh, you don't? It's a breakfast meat.
Yeah.
Okay. How about
I would also like to let you know that a good friend of ours from New Jersey, okay, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Just said, Ryan, he disagrees with you. They live in Jackson, which is in fact in Central Jersey. So I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you.
You're a Southern Jersey guy.
You can call him after the show, and you guys can hammer it out.
I will.
I don't know what any of those things you just said are. I don't know like those.
How about this, Brian? If you went to a Subway or something like that, what type of sandwich would you get from there?
A sub? Are you talking like sub versus hoagie? Is that what you're saying?
It's
Basically,
a hoagie, man. It's a hoagie.
No, it's not.
Yes, it's a hoagie.
No. A hoagie is to me a specific type of bread and a specific type of shape of a sandwich. So yes, it is different. It's different. Yeah. So
disagree. Jackson is also it's a part of South Jersey. We'll claim you, sir. We'll claim you.
Okay. He said Wawa all the way is the last message he wanted me to send to you.
Wawa's good. Wawa's in South Jersey too.
Yeah, Wawa's in Virginia. So
that's all up and down.
Wawa has my favorite candy bar. It's not even really a candy bar. They're called I can't remember what they're called, but they're just like these little. There's like 8 of them in a pack, and they're like these little things like this size, and they come like one's almond, one's dark chocolate, one's regular chocolate. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name, but they're like my favorite things, and I've only ever seen them at Wawa's. So yeah, they're really, really, really good in my opinion. So somebody asked, "What's the difference between a sub and a grinder?" I have no clue.
What is a grinder? Is that a sandwich?
There was a question from Brian Hockney that I accidentally deleted. I was trying to star it, but I actually took it out of the starred thing. I was going to pull it up, and I just took it out of the starred thing. But the question was basically, does Notre Dame have a shot with Deshaun McCullough, which we answered that question. But then he said, does he have no shot because he's an undergrad? So basically the way it works in Notre Dame right now is graduate or freshman are their 2 best bets. Because a freshman still just took nothing but gen eds. You can make up for that a lot easier because if a kid's graduating in 3 years right now, then if he transfers and you don't take any of his freshman classes, he's still on pace to graduate in 3 years. It'd be his 4th year of college, but he could still graduate, get caught up. You can't do that with a junior. A sophomore's a little too far in. It's better for Notre Dame right now if you're a freshman or a graduate, which is a little nuts, but it needs to change, but that's the reality of it. So Trucker Joe says, Ryan this is in response when you said he's a good coordinator, has Golden shown to be a good D coordinator? Yes, he has. And what he has not shown that he's a really good D coordinator. I mean, look,
100%.
You don't have the defense Notre Dame had this year if he's bad. See, this is my issue that I have a little bit here. Not necessarily with Trucker Joe, because he may have a different view on this, but in general, I find that far too often when we're evaluating, it's either one or the other. You're either great or you suck.
Yes.
And there's no like, well, he's just good. He's good. He's not bad. Well, okay, but that's not as good as but they weren't good. They were really good. Marcus Freeman was really good. Clark Lee was really good. Mike Elko was really good. He's just good. There's a difference. One's better, but it doesn't make him bad. Did he have a couple bad games? Yeah. But for the most part, they were good. He was good. He wasn't great. He needs to be a lot better. But we've got to be able to like have more precision in our conversation sometimes. Not everything is great. Not everything is elite. Not everything is bad. It's like there's a lot of in between in these conversations. So to your point, Joe, when we say good, it's not necessarily a high praise for him.
No.
Because the expectation is you need to be better than
excellent.
Good.
Yeah.
Right.
Superb.
And so right. So he's a good defensive coordinator. He's not a great defensive coordinator or even a really good defensive coordinator. I think that's where Notre Dame needs to be. So to your point, Joe, I think I understand Joe's immediate pushback to saying he's good, but just understand the nuance that goes with us saying he's good. If he's a really good defensive coordinator, that'd be able to go, hold on now, let's pump the brakes a little bit. But saying he's good is fair. He was good, but he needs to be better. He needs to be very good. You don't win a championship with just a good defensive coordinator unless you're a team that's, scoring like LSU did. But even that year, they had a great defensive coordinator. It's just the offense scored so dang fast that they were on the field a lot as a defensive team. And so they gave up, 23, 24 points a game, even though Dave Aranda's defense was actually pretty decent that year. It's just they were on the field a lot. So he needs to be better, in my opinion, a lot better. But he hasn't been bad either. And so there's a happy medium. We'll wrap up with these last couple. Do you have time for a couple more, Ryan, or do you need to run right now?
I can do one more if it's
okay.
good.
Because I wanted to do this one. I wanted to get this one from John A1, and then I can handle the rest of them.
Let's do it. Yep.
This is the one. So I'll let you answer it, Ryan, and then you can bail after you're done because he's got to go. He's got to run real quick, but and then I'll follow up afterwards. So John A1 says, do you think Notre Dame changes the Viper role based on the roster? Most of the guys that can play in that spot are long, athletic linebackers with good speed rush ability. So kind of thinking like 4-3-5, 3-3-5, or more of a true stand-up Viper that you see from some other teams.
I mean, John, will they? I'm not sure about that. My opinion, though, and I've talked about this a ton, is that I think that the way college football and the NFL are going, that eventually you want that position, the defensive end position, just in general, to be a little bit more interchangeable, right? There's always going to be principles that you would like to have from both sides, but I truly believe that the future of the defensive end position on both of those levels, the major levels, college football and the NFL, is that you're going to have defensive ends that are much more versatile alignment-wise, guys that can fit both roles. So I think that's where you need to go. Next year, I don't Notre Dame because you're going to have Riley Mills back unless you move Riley Mills inside. But, I mean, Riley Mills is not going to be a guy that's going to be interchangeable to playing Viper, for instance, right? But as the game develops, I do think that in a couple of years, we're going to be in a spot, not just from a Notre Dame perspective, but from a full encompassing perspective, where defenses are going to be more interchangeable because there's going to be offenses that are just going to keep upping the tempo, are going to keep getting different personnel groups that are going to force guys to be uncomfortable in space. So I think that there's going to be an interchangeability that kind of moves forward, in my opinion.
And when that happens, Ryan, that's when Notre Dame's offense becomes truly dominant. Because once I agree with you, once that full integration happens, that's when a team that's willing to come up and punch you in the face for 60 minutes becomes an unstoppable force because you do not have the personnel on your team to stop it.
And that's where it becomes
cyclical aspect
that's
of it.
where it comes back.
Yep. That's why what Jim Harbaugh did was so good when he first moved to Stanford.
Yes.
It's because it was so different than what you were recruiting to stop USC and Oregon and all these, and you can't stop them and stop Stanford with what they did. You can't do both. And that's the cyclical part of it. So so for me, right, if you got to run, you got to run. But if you want to stay and listen to my answer, then you can stay and listen to my answer as well. But for me, Ryan, I do think that Notre Dame can get the personnel to get there. I don't know if they're necessarily there now as a one-gapping team, but I do think that there's going to be some merit when you look at what the schedule looks like moving forward, that where having three bigs, a Riley Mills and a Howard Cross as your 5 techniques, 4 eyes, and then having sort of a Gabriel Rubio as your nose, or hopefully maybe someday getting a little bit bigger guy there, or a disruptive 6'5", 290 Devin Houston is kind of where you're going to see it, where maybe you have Devin Houston as your nose, or Brendan Vernon as your nose, and then Devin Houston and Boubacar as your ends, and then you've got more of a Josh Burnham hybrid linebacker type of guy that you can stack in a 3-3, that you can line up in a 4-down, where in one snap you're an under front or an over front, the next snap you're in an odd front with stacked linebackers with the same personnel. I think that's, to your point, Ryan, is that allows you to then match up with USC one week out of that same look, but then the next week you're playing against a team that runs the football, and Ohio State tries to run it down your throat the second half, and you're fine because you've got that already built into what you do. I think there's merit to that. And I think that's, Utah did that. That's what Utah did. They were a 3-3 team that had that edge guy that could, Gabe Reed type guy that could just walk up and rush, but then drop into coverage. You just need a little bit more beef than what Notre Dame has right now at that nose. I don't think you can do that and be a pure 2-gapping team or 1-gapping team out of that look. You're going to need a guy that can 2-gap over the nose. And I don't know if Notre Dame has that guy right now. Maybe Gabriel Rubio becomes that guy. But here's what I would say, Ryan. It's simple as this. You can run after this. Al Washington, and then whoever my next defensive line coach is, you've got a job to do, but here's part of your job. If you don't get me one West Coast Samoan kid in every class, you're fired. Right? Like, those kids are so perfect. A lot of them have very strong faith, right? So, even though the Catholic aspect of their name is, they're not Catholic, they're either Mormon or Christian, but there's still the attractiveness to the lifestyle. That's why Manti came here. It's why Kona came here. It's why a lot of those kids came here and thrived, that you have the connection there. But I would say go get me one of those kids that right now is going to Utah or BYU or UCLA or Washington. Get me one of those a year to play on my D-line. That's your job. You got to do it, because I think that's the missing piece, is that kind of player. You know what I mean? And I think the reason I talk about the Polynesian kids is because I think they fit so well to what makes Notre Dame unique as an institution, not just as a football team, because we've seen them thrive. I mean, Alohi, Manti, Kona Schwenke, Alo Gilman, Myron Tungvaloa, most of those kids thrive here because a lot of them are disciplined, hard workers, men of faith, good students. I think they fit here. And so I would love to see that. Recruit California, Utah, Hawaii, wherever you got to find them, and they fit. Because you're not going to be able – there's a lot of kids like that aren't Polynesian kids in the Southeast and the Northeast, but those kids don't fit as well into Notre Dame. They're harder to get out of those regions than it is to get those kids to come to Notre Dame, in my opinion. Some people may not like that. I don't care. I think that's what I would do. So, and Ryan, I do know you agree with that because we talked about it the other day. All right. So next question here from Ben Tarnowski is here about Deion Sanders. It creates an interesting conversation, in my opinion. He says, what is it about Prime, Deion Sanders, that is so attractive to recruits and transfers? I know that Jackson State was good under him, but is that a product of poor competition? Is he a good coach? Is it because it's new? Obviously we can't dismiss the personality, right? Like Deion Sanders is a Hall of Famer. I mean, these kids grew up watching his commercials. They know about him as a player. Most of them are probably too young to remember him as a player, but they know of him as a player. Their dads certainly knew about him as a player. To me, I just kind of look at it and I say that's part of it. He's got a lot of flair. He's got a lot of pizzazz. He's got a lot of personality, all that other kind of stuff that you just can't dismiss. And that's going to be part of it, right? I think the other part of it is like I've heard people say this a lot, right? Like, well, they didn't play anybody. Let me tell you what Jackson State. I haven't watched enough Jackson State to know that he's a good coach or not. I haven't. But let me tell you what Jackson State's record was in the years leading up to Deion Sanders getting there. Okay, so in 2014 they went 5-7. They went 3-8 the next year, 3-8 the next year, 3-8 the next year, 5-5 the next year, and then 4-8 the year before he was hired. His first year was the COVID year. They went 4-3, and one of their wins was a forfeit, so they really went 3-3. And the next 2 years, they went 11-2. One of their losses was a 5-point loss to an FBS team, and a lot of their games were not. Some of their games were close, but a lot of them were not close. And then this year, and they lost in the Celebration Bowl to South Carolina State, and then this year they're 12-0. And so, they didn't play anybody that necessarily was very good, but they crushed people. And you're talking about a team that was going like 3-8 and 4-7 every year before he got there. So you can't say, well, the schedule's soft, because the schedule had been soft for a while at Jackson State and they still weren't winning. So I don't think we can just dismiss him as a coach because of the other antics and stuff that isn't typical of a coach. I don't particularly like it, but he's being who he is, number one, and you always want people to be who they are. And number two, you can't argue with the results, in my opinion. Now, is he prepared to transition from that FCS level to Colorado? That's a bigger question. So like one of the comebacks could be, well, Jim Tressel made that move, but Jim Tressel had been a head coach at the FCS level for a very long time and had kind of gone through a lot of the things that it takes to be a head coach, the things that you only learn from being a head coach. I mean, I'm looking at it here. He was at 11. He was at Youngstown State for 15 years before he made that move to Ohio State from the FCS level. He had won 4 national championships before he made that move. Deion Sanders has been a coach for basically 2.5 years. They had the spring season in 2020, and then they had the last 2 years. So there's a lot that he's going to have to learn on the fly. So there may be an adjustment period there, just like there was an adjustment period for Marcus Freeman this year and Dan Lanning in some areas and Brent Venables in some areas, guys who didn't have a lot of coaching experience. But I don't think we can just dismiss the success. Now, Is he going to be able to have the talent gap that he had because of the transfers and the high school kids he was able to get? I don't know. I don't think so. But I don't think we can just dismiss the success he had, because here's the reality of it. The success is a big part of what's working for him. If Deion Sanders went 4-3, 7-5, 6-6 the last 3 years at Jackson State, then he doesn't have the attraction now. It's just like, well, you're just giving him that job because he's prime. Well, now you can say, well, yeah, you're giving him the job now because he's prime, but you're also giving it to him because his team is 23-2 the last 2 years. It's worked. Whatever he's doing has worked. Will it work at the FCS level? I don't know. I really don't know. But I understand it, and I understand why kids are attracted to it. You know, I think that is, I get that. I get that. So kids are going to, some kids are going to flock to that. Some aren't. It's like with every coach. Some kids are going to love Marcus Freeman. Some just like, he's a nice guy, but it just doesn't work for me. That's just the reality of it. But, you know, here's the reality, though. He's going to have about a 2-year window to get this thing turned around before it stops really. Like, okay, it's like with anything. Yeah, it's all cute and fun until, like, you know, what's that scene? Do you remember the scene from Major League 2 where at the beginning, Jack Parkman's the new catcher for the Indians, and he does that little shake, and Bob Uecker's character, Harry Doyle, says he's doing that shake that all the ladies in Cleveland love, right? Well, then later he's with the White Sox, and he does that little thing, and he's like, you know, that's the shake that, you know, all the women in Cleveland puke, right? It's like something's cute and something's fun, or something you like it when it's working and you're winning. And then when you do it when you're losing, it's, he's got a crap attitude. He doesn't take it seriously. Doesn't respect the whatever. You got to win, or that stuff doesn't matter. It's like being hard on players. Kids will deal with it if you're winning. You know, there's a reason why Jim Harbaugh got ran out of San Francisco the minute they started losing, because you don't deal with that if they're losing. And so I think those are things that factor into it. He'll get a little period of grace, but he's going to have to start winning soon. And if he wins, then kids are going to, you know, more kids are going to want to go there. I don't think it's ever going to be a destination like a USC, a Notre Dame, a Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State type of situation, but he'll win there. He'll win there. So that's it's kind of where it'll be. Somebody said, when are the next CFB Nation updates coming out? Well, we've had multiple shows this week. We're just not putting them on the YouTube channel just yet. We're going to get back to that here soon, but they are coming out on the podcast app. So definitely make sure you're subscribing to that. I am going to have a video up later today podcast and video that John Garcia did breaking down 2023 quarterback recruiting right now. So that's kind of where that is. All right. Alan Watson says, hello, Brian. And Ryan, I remember, I think BK's first or second year, I remember looking at the guys that came in at the big tight end from Oil City, Pennsylvania, that'd be Ben Koyak, and thought these guys look different. Now I can say it again. Yeah, Alan, you are correct. They're recruiting some really talented tight ends. I mean, really talented tight ends. That's what I'm saying. I think they're going to be fine at tight end next year. If by fine you mean how will they compare to the rest of college football, they'll be fine. They'll be good there. If your gauge is, will anyone be Michael Mayer? Well, then you're going to be disappointed. That shouldn't be the standard. The standard should be, are they going to be good? Can they help the team win? Can they play an important role in the offense? I think they can do all those things. They're just not going to, it's just not going to be the type of play that they had from Michael Mayer, in my opinion. Robert Bishop said, would you guys have ranked Edwards third out of the running backs we were bringing in? So a couple things. They were not recruiting him as a running back per se. They were recruiting him as an athlete. He was going to do a lot of different things, some slot, a little bit of running back, but more slot, more return game. If you were going to evaluate him as a pure running back, then yeah, he's third. He's not as good as Jaden Lamar and Jeremiah Love as a pure running back. He's just a unique, explosive, dynamic player that brought an element that you want and need more of in your offense. I think they're going to be fine without him. I mean, they're loaded there, but it's kind of like this. Like, are they going to be fine without Dylan Edwards? Yeah, they're going to be fine. But what I don't like is when people say, it's like when a kid transfers or a kid goes pro. Well, we'll be fine because we still have so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, yeah, it's true. But wouldn't you be even better if you had so-and-so and so-and-so and the kid that left? And that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, they're going to be fine at running back and receiver. More than fine. But I still would have liked him to be a part of it if he was willing to buy in, and clearly he wasn't willing to buy in. And that's the reason he's not in the class anymore. I got a super chat from CF who also had a question. Thank you for that very much. This is any news on the portal quarterback. Is it true? Is it true that the portal quarterback is ineligible for the bowl game? Yes, portal players do not play in bowl games. They can't play until the next semester starts, which is going to be in January for most people. So yeah, he will not. Whoever the portal quarterback is, if they get a portal quarterback, that guy will be playing. Next time you'll see him playing or playing at Notre Dame will be in spring practice. So that'll be it. We have a question here from ERO 5.2. I know you asked this one earlier. We get to it, and this did not get to it. What is the ideal size for Burnham and Gobier next season, and where are they now? Well, Josh Burnham's listed at, I think, 6'3 and a half, 233 pounds, I think is what he's listed as. Give me a second. I'm going to pull it up because I actually just had this in I'm working on a replace and reload article for the front page that'll be out here in a little bit. So let me just look at that thing real quick. So he was listed this year at 6'3 and a half, 233. Aiden Gobier is listed at basically 6'4 and a half, 241. I don't know if he's 241. I don't really put a lot into ideal size. It's more about functional strength and can you play at a certain size? I mean, I've seen guys 260 that can't play like 260 guys, and I've seen guys 230 that play like they're 260. I think for me, it's about, having enough weight that you can hold up at the point of attack, but not being to the size where, some guys, you look at two different you look at the same body type, 6'3", 230. Some guy's going to be able to gain 30 pounds and get more explosive. Some guy's going to gain 30 pounds and get slow because his body can't handle it. I don't know what their natural body type is. I think Aiden Gobier, I'd like to see him eventually around 250 of good 250, like a real 250. Josh Burnham, I don't think needs to get a whole lot bigger. I think his thing is maybe 5 to 10 more pounds, but just get stronger and improve your technique. I especially for that Viper role, I don't think that guy has to be 260 pounds. Isaiah was that way because he just was a big kid naturally. I mean, Julian Aguara played that position at like 225 sometimes and played it pretty well. So I think it just depends on the kid. It's got to be natural, right? That's the thing. It's got to be natural. So, yeah, we'll see kind of how that plays. All right. And then the last question that we're going to have here, and we'll kind of pull this up, is who's the surprise player of the 2023 class? Just to remind people that we will be doing something along these lines more in depth on signing day and in the shows after signing day. But if by surprise player, you mean a guy that maybe is ranked lower now that could end up being a really high-ranked player, I think I know who that guy is for Ryan, and that's Armel Mookum. Ryan kind of views him as a guy that may never play because he's raw, but he's also a guy that he thinks could like someday be a dude and really blow up. I don't know if I have a surprise guy because I think most Notre Dame fans appreciate the talent of the players that they have. I mean, if I were to say a Don Schuler, that wouldn't surprise Notre Dame fans. So it's kind of hard to think about who that is. I would say maybe Joe Otting as an offensive lineman. Ben Minich is someone somebody said could be that guy on defense. I think Ben Minich has a chance to be a pretty good player down the road. If him, Peyton Bowen, and Don Schuler could end up being a really special safety tandem down the road. But I think a guy for me that I don't think gets a lot of talk that I think has a chance to be a really good player at the next level is Devin Houston. I think Devin Houston is really an underrated player. I think he's got a chance to be a really good football player at the next level for sure. Somebody else mentioned Rico. He could be there for sure because he gets a little overshadowed by some of the other receivers. Caleb Smith. No, that's who it is for me. Caleb Smith on offense, Devin Houston on defense. That's my two. The two guys that could be the biggest surprise. And again, I don't say Don Schuler because I don't think me saying a Don Schuler surprises anybody in this chat. I don't. I think people in this chat get that. Maybe nationally because some of the clown rankings we've seen, but I don't think anybody in this chat's going to be like, oh, Rico's not a surprise. What are you talking about? We all think he's going to be good. I mean, not Rico, but Don Schuler. I think they'd all think he's going to be good. So I don't really count that one as a surprise, in my opinion. So anyway, so that's going to be it for the show today, everybody. Thank you all so much for being with us. This is, I believe, I'm not sure if the guys are going to be doing. Let me just see if I got a message from Sean Stiers. I'm not sure I'm not sure if they're going to be doing it. Let me actually ask Sean Stiers if they're doing a rapid fire tonight. I'm not sure if they're going to do that tonight or not. So hopefully he'll respond to me before we're done. But before we get out of here, I do want to thank everybody for the patience that you've seen. If you are someone who's on the website and you use PayPal and you're wondering why you got a cancellation message, I have another email that I sent. We've gone through and now basically gotten rid of our PayPal account. That show is getting ready to start right now. So you're going to want to run over there. I'm going to talk to Sean here about moving that show back down the road. But the IB Nation Sports Talk guys are going to be starting a rapid fire here in a couple minutes. And so go there. But if you're a PayPal member and you got that cancellation, we canceled our PayPal account. So we're no longer using PayPal as a membership payment method. And so once we canceled those accounts, it triggered an automatic cancellation of your account on Irish Breakdown. The cancellation is not a true cancellation. You still have access to your account. You still have access to the board. What it just meant was your auto renew was canceled, which meant at the end of your whatever payment method you've had, whether you're monthly or annually, it just means when that term ends, then you're going to have to re-up. It won't auto renew. You have to put in a new payment method is all that means. So no one lost access, or you shouldn't. And if you did, shoot me an email and we'll get you squared away, but no one's lost access. You shouldn't lose access. That should be good to go. So before you head over to IB Nation Sports Talk, hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Sign up for the CFB Nation YouTube channel, but also the podcast app. I think there's a lot of people that aren't signed up for that need to sign up for that because we're eventually going to move that away from the Irish Breakdown feed, and I still want those guys to thrive and get the downloads and the views and the payment that they're getting now. So make sure you're subscribing to the CFB channel podcast app as well. Definitely check that out. That's where you'll find Lucky Lefty, CFB All-America, State of Recruiting. We're going to start doing all of our draft stuff that we're going to do is going to go on that part of the podcast with Ryan and I. So we get into the draft season as well. So you're definitely going to subscribe to that as well. And of course, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So thanks for being with us, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Head over to IB Nation Sports Talk right now for their Friday Rapid Fire.